Oh, got quiet all of a sudden. Oh, no. I'd like to call this meeting of the Clay County Commission to order. We'll begin this evening with the invocation from Reverend Mark Willis. And I will mention this to the Reverend just so everybody knows. When you come up to address the commission, please make sure the green light is on, state your name, and then address the commission with whatever your comments are. With that, Reverend.
My name is Mark Willis. I'm the pastor for North Oak Christian Church, a congregation here in the Northland that will be celebrating our 50th anniversary on June 8th this year. I'm very thankful to be asked to come tonight. Would you please join me for the invocation? Wise and loving God, first let me say thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance and for community. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thanks as well for your freedom to embrace you or the freedom to reject you. And thank you for loving us even so, from your boundless and gracious nature. We pray today especially for these public servants who have come to conduct the work of county commissioner. We ask that you graciously grant them wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and the true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice and rightness, confidence in what is good and right, the ability to work together in harmony even through honest disagreement, personal peace in their lives, and joy in their task. I pray for the agenda set before them today. Please give an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in and around our community. It is in your most blessed name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you, and congratulations on your anniversary. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Nolte?
Here.
Commissioner Withington?
Here.
Commissioner Lawson? Here. Commissioner Wagner?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Here.
With that, we will go to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion related to our agenda? Commissioner Johnson, you are recognized.
Move to approve tonight's agenda.
Motion's been made for the approval of this evening's agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Withington?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wagner?
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Next on our agenda are public comments. If any citizens wish to come forward and make any comments to the commission, please come to the podium, make sure the light is on, and state your name and then make your comment. I understand there are a number of people here who are interested in the airport operations discussion item or some of the other items. If it's on the agenda, that would probably be the more appropriate time to make those comments, but certainly any citizen who has any comments to make, please come forward. Okay. That brings us to this evening's consent agenda. Administrator?
The consent agenda allows the Commission to act upon items considered to be routine and approved in one motion. These may include items that have been reviewed by the Commission in a prior session. There will be no separate discussion unless a Commissioner requests that an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. There are 4 items on the consent agenda this evening. Commission meeting minutes from January 30th and February 6th. Resolution 2025-46 is approving invoice payments for Clay County for the period of February 1st through February 7th. There are 205 invoices totaling $372,859.04. Resolution 2025-49 is approved Clay County Collector's Report and recommendation of tax sales surplus of certain parcels. And Resolution 2025-50 approved the identified 2025 sole source vendors.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson.
Move to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Motion's been made for the approval of this evening's consent agenda. Discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Withington?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wagner?
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
That brings us to this evening's regular agenda. First item on this evening's regular agenda is 2025-47. Administrator?
Resolution 2025-47 is approve invoice payments for the Clay County Prosecutor's Office from February 1st through February 7th. There are a total of 7 invoices in the amount of $7,266.65.
Commissioner Johnson?
Move to approve 2025-47.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2025-47. Discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Withington? Commissioner Lawson? Commissioner Wagner?
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson?
I recuse myself.
Motion passes 5 in favor, 1 recusal.
The next and last item on this evening's regular agenda is 2025-48. Administrator?
Resolution 2025-48 is approve sole source number 12-25 and contract with TRAP Incorporated for assessment software. Assessor Tracy Baldwin is here to provide information to the commission.
Please proceed.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tracy Baldwin, Clay County Assessor. Happy to answer any questions that you may have with this software.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, Commissioner Johnson.
Move to approve 2025-48.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2025-48. Any further discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Withington? Commissioner Lawson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wagner?
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Next on our agenda are discussion items. There are 2 discussion items on this evening's agenda. The first being the opioid settlement task force presentation. Administrator?
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. As the Commission is aware, there was a settlement that was done nationwide. The state of Missouri participated in it, and so did Clay County when it came to the opioid crisis. There has been a settlement. The county has been receiving funds. And in 2024, the Commission created a task force with a charter and appointed members in the community to take a look at the issues within Clay County, what were services, where were there gaps in services, and come forward with a recommendation on the utilization of those funds. And so the task force has worked very hard over the last year or so, holding meetings, and the chair is here along with some members of the task force to present to the Commission what has happened over the past year and their recommendation to the Commission on the utilization of those funds. So I'd like to introduce Darryl Minke, who is the chair of the task force, and he will do the presentation.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Good evening, Commissioners. Darryl Minke, Director of Public Health for Clay County. So as Diana mentioned, so I was tasked to be the task force chair here. So let me pull this up. Good? Okay.
Could you speak just a little bit more into the microphone, sir?
Absolutely. So just to give a quick overview, so I'll go over the members, the timeline, data and information analysis, plan and reporting metrics for the proposed items, and then future of the task force as well. So just a quick overview. You all have had this information previously. So just a list of the members here. So Trish Lewis, I think she was going to be here. If she got here, she's the co-chair as well, and the rest of the members are listed up there. We did have some guest consultants during the planning and evaluation. So folks from Beacon, Dr. Terry Hargrave, she's in the audience as well. Northland Coalition members, Cornerstones of Care, Mr. Wu, and some staff from the Clay County Public Health Center as well, along with Alicia Taylor. She gained some interest in the task force along the way. I think she attended one meeting. All right, so just an overview of the meeting dates. Task force, like she mentioned, task force was appointed in March of 2024. Those are meeting dates that we had publicized and we met in person. And then here are the data and information analysis that we went through. So lots of different information. You can see in your packet there was one item, and this is the front page of it. So that's the allowable uses. I wanted you to have those resources to look through because those are referenced throughout the presentation. Looked at overdose death reporting in Missouri. Looked at what other organizations were doing through a nationwide webinar, and then also lots of consultations with community partners. So our goal was to create a plan with Clay County resources that with the dollars spent in Clay County for items that were already happening in the county. So we didn't want to develop brand new infrastructure around anything that's very costly and doesn't get a lot of traction over time. We wanted to funnel these resources and get these dollars in use. So this is the initial plan of the funding levels throughout the year that we went through. We did just get some notification that there are additional funds that are not included in the plan. So we'll have some discussion a little bit later on about what to do with the plan and how to approach that. But all in all, the original amount was over $1.7 million through 2038. So these are the organizations that are listed to receive opioid settlement funds. So we have Beacon Mental Health. They want a peer support staff and some money for housing and transportation for individuals. Northland Coalition has some youth programming with mini grants, Office of Dispute Resolution, juvenile drug testing and youth programming, as well as Clay County Public Health Center, a little bit of money for Narcan vending machines to get out in the public. So that asterisk at the bottom refers to the multi-page plan here with the funding breakdown. All right, so to start out with what a peer support staff individual for Beacon Health would mean. They would work with Clay County Detention Center to identify individuals to reduce relapse rates, share personal experience, educate on coping skills and warning signs, and really just utilize that Beacon network to make sure that those individuals that are in the detention center get the resources they need to transition well. And on each of these slides, I note the allowable uses down usually in the right-hand corner to reference to that allowable use document.
Excuse me a moment. Commissioner Johnson, did you want to be recognized?
A quick question for you. It says there, the first bullet item there, will work with the Clay County Detention Center to identify individuals and reduce relapse rates. Mm-hmm. Does Beacon Mental Health actually have folks that are in the detention center? I was looking for the sheriff to see if he knew.
No, they're going to develop the partnership to have the peer support individual that their main duties is to be dedicated to the detention center. We realize that there are going to be others that maybe, especially at the beginning, there wouldn't be a full caseload that way, but they would prioritize those individuals in the detention center that are being
So it's not
released.
actually putting a body inside the detention center
No.
to work with the inmates, okay.
No, not on a day-to-day basis. They would have peer meetings and things like
Okay,
that.
thanks.
Before we resume, does any other commissioner have any question now that we've kind of hit a bit of a stopping point? Thank you. Please proceed.
Absolutely. So this is just a little bit of Beacon's initial data about the individuals that they treat, outpatient programming, and then opioid targeted response. And so some of the metrics that they presented, they would track the individuals in the program. They would have recovery programming meetings, 3 per day. Some of the interventions they would track the appropriate interventions administered, and that would be analyzed on a quarterly audit. So both of those metrics would be using their EMR, so they've got that data in place. And then just the staffing. So HR would measure that one full-time staff to administer those duties. On the housing and transportation note, initially, we had these as separate items for Beacon, but in the consultations with each of these organizations to see what they could actually do and what would be most practical, we combined those items into one funding source. They have very easy tracking metrics there, but what it allows is some years there may be additional funding needed to be used for housing. Some may have a year where more transportation is the issue. So they wanted that flexibility, but really what they target is funds used to resolve housing crisis to lead to improved outcomes in their treatment. It could be for mortgage, utilities, temporary hotel to get them to the next spot. But again, it is all using that utilizing that beacon network to resolve the housing issues. And again, on the transportation side as well. So it could be just getting that transportation to work or school, to that vocational education, whatever it may be. And it may be public transit, it may be maintenance repairs on their car, or whatever it may be, just to bridge that gap. Or utilize Uber Health as well in certain situations. And they have those systems already established in their organization. So again, on the housing and the transportation, the manager will review and approve all the expenditures from the fund, and then the transactions will identify the date, the vendor, and the purpose of the expenditures. So that would just be a reporting metric on the dollars spent. For the Office of Dispute Resolution, so a couple of things. So there's drug testing for juveniles that, as needed, to include recovery and support and other appropriate services as needed. And so that's one of the allowable uses. And then as well as getting on the prevention side. So with youth, one of them is Power Moves for ages 13 to 18. And then the other one is youth substance use education. And that's for young adults from 13 to 17. So what they do, help participants overcome obstacles and reshape their thinking. And so this one is the Power Moves is a 6-week program, so a little bit more intense. And then the youth substance use education is a one in-person class. And so that helps teens identify triggers, develop healthy skills, establish healthy relationships, and manage impulse control. So overall, just trying to target those youth populations to help establish good practices. Okay, whoops. Okay, and so on the reporting metrics for this one, that would be drug testing. That's very easily identifiable, so the number's tested. And then on the Power Moves and youth substance use education, those are both surveys, so they'll have the number of individuals seen, and then also the survey responses to have an analysis. So was there benefit from the program? What did the individuals get out of the program? What difference has it made? For Northland Coalition, those are the mini grants. So we understand the Northland Coalition has many coalitions across Clay and Platte County. We wanted to make sure that these initiatives would stay in Clay County with these Clay County dollars. So working with their staff, they've ensured us that they could provide mini grants, funding to local prevention coalitions, youth prevention clubs, advisory councils, and prevention programs, as well as schools. So I've listed the Clay County coalitions there. So Excelsior Springs Safe, Kearney Holt Can, Liberty Alliance for Youth, Smithville CIA, and Missouri City PERC. So those are some options there. They would be evidence-based programs targeted at youth substance use problems or related projects and risk factors. So could be curriculum, campaigns, school drug awareness. So really the core of this is to provide those dollars in youth populations and use that grassroots effort initiatives to let those communities determine what those dollars would be used for most effectively. And so Northland Coalition would provide the oversight, they'd do the grant administration and all of that, and ensure those dollars stayed within Clay County. Okay, so these are the items that they would look at. So full description of the activity or activities conducted by the grant, numbers of individuals reached, the impact that the program includes at least one or more measures, change in knowledge, change in attitudes, changes in behavior, and/or changes in environment. So that could be pictures, stories, program samples, and materials, and then budget summaries for receipts. So annually, the Northland Coalition will compile the data from the grantees and report a full summary of the evaluation metrics to the Commission. And here's the last one, fairly simple, straightforward. So this is a small amount of money to increase vending machines. That would be the Clay County Public Health Center. These vending machines cost roughly $500. We have a partnership with MIMH to currently supply Narcan at no charge. So we would be doing the monitoring of and restocking of all of these machines. We already have some interested partners locations. So the Clay County Sheriff's Office, Gladstone Fire or Community Center. Gladstone just said that they're interested in one. And then is Beacon Mental Health. We also have other potential locations, Kearney Fire Department, Smithville Fire Department, North Kansas City Fire Department, and any others. So these machines would help increase distribution at no cost to the public. just getting those out there. On a side note, we also have the fentanyl test strips that we put in all of those machines as well. And and that's at no charge and no cost to us. All right, so that would be just the number. So target, we'd be able to purchase 5 new vending machines and get those out in the public. And then this is an example of what we have as our metrics. So in 2023, we started the Narcan distribution, 650 boxes. In 2024, because we have current locations at our office, also Birmingham Fire Department and the Good Samaritan Center in Excelsior Springs. And also we distribute at community events. We've given out 2,523 boxes of Narcan. All right, so as mentioned earlier, we have that plan in place, and that addresses that $1.7 million. Some of the information on this slide could be up in flux because we did learn that there is more opioid money that is available now. And so that provides a wrinkle because in the Opioid Settlement Task Force Charter, you all approved that the task force shall automatically terminate and disband concurrently with the Clay County Commission's approval of an approved plan. So just to keep that in mind, so as we were going through this planning process, that coalition wants to stick together. And so what we said is, okay, there's more substance abuse issues than just opioids in Clay County. We would like to reform as a substance abuse task force and address more of a widespread, and it would be volunteer-based. So those individuals plus anybody else that would want to join, we could go up that front as well. So if it wasn't under the county commission header, it wouldn't necessarily have all of the requirements for posting agendas and things like that. So that's why all of that information is there. But we could lead that annual evaluation and presentation to the commission on all those metrics if you like. Or the question is, what do we do now that there's more money in that pot? So it's going to be an evolving issue with the task force, I would say, and this settlement money coming in, because we don't know that end dollar date or end dollar amount, actually, because there's interest on that money that's come in. There could be more down the line. We just learned that extra money came in or is coming in this morning, so that wasn't part of the plan. Who knows what a few months from now would look like. So that would be up to you all to say, okay, this is what we'd like the task force to do. We'd like them to continue, whatever that may be. But all in all, the plan that you have in front of you, lots of hours of some dedicated volunteers and staff really made a difference in this plan. We want to get these dollars out to the public and make a difference. Some of those funds have been sitting there for a few years now, and so we just want to make a difference with those funds out in the community. Any questions?
Thank you very much. We certainly appreciate the hard work that this board has put in, and the amount of information that we've gotten. And the presentation certainly is something that gives us a very good place to start trying to grapple more with this issue. And I think I'm going to go ahead and we'll see what the other commissioners have to say. Commissioner Carpenter, you are recognized.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Darrell, and everybody who served on the task force. In terms of the new potential money coming in, any sense of scale there in terms of how much we're talking?
Pretty large sense of scale, about $980,000. So really big difference. So there's no, as far as I know, there's no determination on when that money has to be spent. So this could be, it could be as simply as if you all wanted to approve it, it could be we approve the structure and then just continue those line items year after year until the money is expended. That a rough estimate would be like 7 or 8 more years past 2038. So it's a long haul to get these folks presenting those metrics to you every year. But it will make a sustained difference in the community as well. So that's the great part of it, that it's got a structure to it and that it could be expanded just year after year until that's expended.
So yes, say more about the spending beyond 2038. Why would we do that?
So we know. So the plan that we presented, we were just taking into account when we thought that funding would stop. So from the, I believe, from the beginning of it, there was a 20-year period where opioid settlement funding would be coming in, and so we used some of that, and some started at different years. So 2038 was a target where we knew money was still going to be coming in when we started the plan. Now that extra funding is coming in, that date could be bumped back, because I don't think that there's any defined end date for contributors to have to close it out.
So just for some clarification for the commission, each one of these settlements has their own settlement documents, whether it is Walgreens or CVS or any of the big pharma companies. And so some have elected, when they have determined what the dollar amount is, some have agreed to pay it equally over 18 years. Some have said they front load it and they pay more the first couple of years, 5 years, and then down. Some pay more at the back end, and some have just written a check for the full amount. So it is kind of very hard for the task force and all of us to kind of put a handle on just exactly how much is going to come in. And I think the task force had some conversation about, this is a great plan, and we've kind of based it on what we know that we have in place right now, and that the task force, because things evolve, right? Things change. And so looking at this plan in 5 years, maybe, by the task force or another task force may have different recommendations based on, again, additional funding and what we're seeing needs in the community, because it may change.
Very good. So on the annual amount breakdown that has sort of been from 2032 to 38, the 65,000 number, is that an estimate, or is that what is, as of today, what we expect? And how would the 900,000 potentially impact those numbers?
Which document are you talking about? Are you talking about this one or the slide in the presentation?
Oh, gosh.
Sorry, I don't know how to go back.
It's just got the annual amount number and the cumulative amount number page 11, funding levels.
This funding level one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was the document that was provided to the task force. So each year, like Diana said, some have front-loaded that a lot.
Yeah, I see.
And then, so that one hits 2032 and it goes down to $65,000 annually. Now that is much greater. So when we were developing the plan, we wanted to have it in a structure where we knew we had dollars up front. We knew that they would start to dwindle as it went along, and we didn't want to have somebody without money that was promised money. So that's why it kind of shrunk, and we tapered off line by line every year.
Those numbers reflect the dollars coming in, though, right? Annually.
Correct. Those are the numbers that we know of at the time that we received, and we are receiving those settlements. And so, we have, coming into this year, we have fund balance, and because it's a separate fund, we've isolated these funds, but we have just been informed that there's been a new settlement. And so I don't know that we know all the details on how they're paying, whether it's a flat amount for X amount of years or lump sum, but in the calculation, the auditor's provided that he believes, based on what we have here versus what we've seen from this new settlement, that's about almost another additional $900 and some odd thousand. Now, how that comes in over the period of time, I don't know that we know that yet.
Cool. Well, wonderful. Thank you very much. Very helpful. I'm certainly inclined to spend in the money as we get it sort of in an expeditious manner. To your point, these things change. They ebb and flow, the types of drugs change, the types of populations experiencing and so what we know for sure is that, we're having a lot of hardship now. And, how are things going to be in 2040? I don't know, right? Maybe we made a lot of progress as a country and really gotten to a better place on this issue. But we know today that it's a big problem. Fortunately, we've seen some declines in some of the numbers these last couple of years, which is good, because we hit some really high peaks there for a while. But it's still way too high, still way too many people, families struggling with it, and people losing their lives, of course. Keeping some kind of volunteer task force, look forward to that conversation with everybody about what that looks like. But yeah, having a plan to spend the money, expeditiously and get it out the door as we're getting it to save lives today sounds like the right call to me. But appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you, and Director Menke, thank you for your leadership on this. And I was just wondering, if you served in this task force, could you raise your hand? Okay, so we've got a couple of our other members
We
here.
have some visitors that were part of the task force as well,
Gotcha,
not
gotcha.
actually named in the task force, but
Understood. Well,
participants.
thanks to all of you for your work on this. It is very much appreciated. Just to kind of follow along on a couple of points, I do appreciate that there's a bit of an unknown here, which is too bad because I would probably ask, what's the spending plan? But I guess I can't have one tonight, so that's fine. I understand the limitation of that. But what does stick out to me is, the categories that you've identified, I have no problem with. I think they're fine. I think they're okay. But as I note that some may have people and therefore salaries involved with that, and grants following that with that as well, there is some concern I have on consistency of things that may be ongoing expenses. And so I guess looking at your funding levels and just what was mentioned a few moments ago, I would certainly go on the side of trying to create consistency along those annual amounts to the degree that they can be plugged in, so that for those ongoing expenses, you actually have a funding source that actually will pay for them. Otherwise, folks like Beacon and others that may receive grant funding will have to figure out, well, what do we do next year? Because if nothing changed here and you went from 381,000 to 65,000, other than the Narcan pieces, which were only $500, I don't know how you would sustain some of this stuff over time. So, yeah, go ahead.
If I could, so again, the task force looked at the amount of money that we have in the bank, how much
Right.
what we know is coming in for each one of those that have settled, whether they're upfronting, paid a lump sum, or whatever we have.
Right.
And so the proposal that they have provided to you in your packet, where they've identified each year to each one of the programs, is basically sustainable based on the money that we know we're actually
That's
receiving.
great.
And so that's why, the first year, we are expending less than what we have in the bank. Because again, we're trying to ensure that we have funds to continue going on these obligations. So we've kind of smoothed that out, but as we said, we've got some additional funding that would come available. And, once we know what that looks like, then I would say that's an opportunity. But again, I think the strategy on this was to do something on an annual basis that we could do sustained throughout the life of this. And so there will still be funds at the end of every year, probably earning interest. So we're always going to have money to analyze and make a recommendation on.
That's fine. That's fine. So because of that potential change, I tend to look at my colleague, Commissioner, to his comments, just regarding the ability to have someone be able to look back at this on at least an annual basis, if not, every 5 years or whatever you want to do, because some things change, as was pointed out by Commissioner Carpenter. And so, if I could make that suggestion too, I think that is worth looking at. Not to say that you and everyone else on the committee has a 15-year obligation ahead of you, unless you want it. But I do think there is value to look at those recommendations from the professionals who are out there in the field, and whether it is in the suggested way you've put out there or any other, there's certainly some value, at least to me, to have that expertise at hand and available to make some suggestions as there are additional dollars available. So again, thanks to all of you for your participation and the work that you've done, and look forward to perhaps having you do more of it in the future. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you and everybody that worked on the committee for the work you put into this. I really appreciate it. A lot of good work gone into this. And I also want to acknowledge that I realize that even though we're talking, maybe a couple $1 million, that might sound like a lot of money, but spread over as many years as it is and tackling such a major crisis, it's a drop in the bucket. There's not a whole lot that you can do. But with that, my question is, and just know this is a question. This is not any kind of direction at all. I'm just really curious as to if there's any discussions, if you could share any discussions you had on the enforcement side. If you guys thought about the enforcement side. When I say enforcement, I don't care about the street level, the user. I'm talking about either majors coming in or the local high school kid where everyone knows, hey, that's a kid, if you want, fentanyl, that's a kid to go to. And I know the prosecutor's office and the sheriff was involved in this. I just wonder if there's any discussions at all about enforcement, using this money for enforcement or not.
No, there was some talk with the sheriff's office about having it for some of their media campaigns, things like that, but it was
Education.
never on the enforcement side.
Okay, thank you.
Unless I spoke wrong. Sheriff.
Further discussion? Any questions? Yeah, like I say, this is going to be, this is interesting reading. I'm looking forward to kind of crunching through it a little bit. And I think first slide had something about continuation of a similar body going forward. I think that's something we should certainly be considering. So yeah, I'm, exactly what form that takes, I'm not sure. I think we'd like to review, if there are any recommendations, I think I would not be adverse to hearing from you folks and see if there's any bases we're missing, see if there's any areas where we had a gap of somebody there who brought a certain level of expertise that you as a group would like to see perhaps included should we decide to go forward with that.
Okay. No, I think the task force makeup was phenomenal. I mean, we had folks with lived experience in multiple sectors of what really happens here in Clay County and the professionals. So that was all great. I think just as I had on that one slide in the charter of the task force, you said as soon as the plan is approved, it disbands. So what that would look like, how you guys would want to approach that. Would you want to do a partial funding level, revisit, a few years down the road with that task force, or go ahead and assign it, reform it 5 years later, whatever that may look like. But we're committed to come as a group and help manage those metrics that were on the slides, to say, hey, we dedicated our time to this. This is what we're promising that we can do as organizations. And we want to prove it to you, right? So we are very dedicated to that fiscal responsibility. So there's that option. I would say if you didn't want to go down that approach, an easy approach could be to, like I started out, extend those dollars that come in past year 2038 to just keep that same level of funding. We kind of tiered a couple of them on the peer support and the transportation. If you notice, those award dollars go up in different years in 2030 and in 2035. That was just cost of doing business increases. We didn't want to say, hey, do this now in 2025 for this dollar, and we expect in 2038 it's going to cost the same thing. We're realistic on that component. But you could just extend those years out, because there really is no end date to have to spend this money. But we do want to get it out in the public and make it effective. So lots of options there, but look forward to your all's discussion and questions and approval, hopefully.
Administrator, did you want to add anything?
Well, it's a kind of a great segue to talk about next steps. So the thought process would be, if the commission approves the recommendation that comes, the thought process was we would be back in front of you in 2 weeks with the ability to sort of adopt what is presented to you this evening. We could include in that a role for the task force to do on an annual basis, to take a look at the metrics and report back to the commission. And so you're always looking at this, right? Just because you adopt the plan, we would write it. So you always have the discretion in 3 or 4 years, if things change and what is presented to you for 2030 needs to be something different, you always have that ability to make that change. And again, we would have them involved on an annual basis to help provide that information. The next step, if the commission did approve that in 2 weeks, then the following step would be to enter into service agreements, as we've done in the past with agencies like Beacon and the different ones that are here, to outline just exactly what is in the plan, what is the expectation, and what are those metrics that they would be required to provide on an annual basis. And so that would sort of be the steps involved, so that we could then get those items in place and then start allocating these funds out into the community for these programs that have been identified, unless the commission wants to do it in a different way.
I was going to interject.
what you've described is fine. I guess my one thought, concern, idea, whatever, is the idea, if you'll forgive the health term, of dosage, in the sense that if I'm projecting out $65,000 and some change over a series of years, and I have the opportunity for new funds to come in, I would like, however that recommendation can come, to talk about whether or not it makes more sense to extend out years, or whether it is more effective, based on your metrics and how you look at it, to actually inject more funds earlier or over time or whatever, because I'll be honest, you can do a lot, but if you don't have a lot to work with to do it, you will not reach the sort of reach you want. And so, go ahead, yeah.
Absolutely correct, and I think that's why, in keeping the task force together in some format, and if they're talking to, and we'll say Beacon with peer support, right?
Right.
We've had those conversations. One of the key things that the task force did ask all these agencies is, do you have the capacity? If we give you these funds, can you do what you're saying you're going to do? Because if you can't, right, then we want to allocate the funds someplace else. And so that's a key component of it. But I think if after a year, peer support is working well, Beacon comes back and in their annual presentation says, we've done X, we had a gap here, we could have done more if we had additional funding. And then I think that's the opportunity to then reallocate and look at it almost like an annual allocation, but at least this is sort of given a foundation.
Yeah, no, that's fine, that's fine. I appreciate those answers, and again, appreciate your work. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we envisioned, was to have a base kind of an effort being made. However, this is a dynamic problem. It's going to improve and it's going to get worse over the course of years. We really have no way of knowing. And so that allows us the flexibility and, quite honestly, the continuation of this task force in some more long-term form allows those who are the experts to be able to advise us on a continuing basis, because if there's one thing I think we can depend on, is the situation will not remain static. And so being able to react, and some of the methods used, say, in this year may well not be as effective. There may be more effective strategies that we can employ, say, 5 years from now. So having that real-time advice flowing back allows us the ability to be informed and to react quickly. Commissioner Carpenter?
Thanks, yeah. So sort of to that point, so in 2 weeks, the plan is to vote, and are we committing to the sort of the plan set forth here before us this evening at that time?
That's the current, excuse me, that's the current plan. If the commission wants to give us direction to do something else, I think the task force, we're here to hear that. And if you have other work that you want the task force to do before that plan is adopted, we're happy to do that.
Very good. No, I think that sounds like a good plan to me. Do we expect to have any additional information about the 900,000? How much it'll be and when we'll get it by then?
We can certainly try to see what that looks like coming in on an annual basis.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask is just to sort of reiterate what I said before. My pretty strong preference would be to distribute that additional 900,000, which is like 60% essentially increase from what the numbers have here. I would strongly prefer to front end that money to the extent that it's going to come in a way that we can. As opposed to spreading it out, in the out years beyond 2038, for example. Because the world is changing fast. I anticipate that the world's going to keep changing faster as we go forward. That tends to be how things are going. And so making predictions about the way things are going to be in 2040 and beyond, to me, seems, I would rather spend the money now, like I said, because we know we have a big problem now. And so to the extent that we have that flexibility with the 900,000, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, we just need to determine how much of that 900,000 is coming in what year, a lump sum, or over 18 years, right?
Yeah.
But we'll see what we can find out, and if it looks like that, then the recommendation may tweak a little, because I think everyone's best interest is to utilize these funds efficiently, effectively, and in the community as quickly as possible.
Yeah, thanks.
Commissioner Johnson?
I just want to echo that. I agree with Commissioner Carpenter that the more we could put up front, I think the better. Bottom line is, people are dying, lives are being ruined because of this, and this isn't going to end this crisis at all, a couple $1 million, but it could save a couple lives. If we could save a couple lives, it's worth it to me. So my thought is, if we can put more money up front and get to work quicker, I'm all for that.
Okay, are there, as we're working on this, obviously, if any commissioners have any thoughts after this evening's meeting, please forward them to the administrator as far as how structurally we might look to improve what we have. Also, any comments from the existing commission or citizens for that matter. Let us know what we need to be considering as we move forward in putting together a more permanent, or at least more long-term perhaps, advisory board so that we can make sure we are on top of this as much as possible. Are there any other comments from any other commissioners? Would any of the other members like to comment, or would anybody from the general public like to comment? Oh, no, not the sheriff, not the sheriff. Mr. Sheriff, by the way, thank you for participating also, certainly.
Will Aiken, Clay County Sheriff. Commissioner Johnson, to answer your question, we had a very brief conversation discussion when we had, I think it was our first meeting, about enforcement, but it was quickly decided that the money, to your point, wasn't enough. It was just a drop in the bucket. And so enforcement measures, thinking about what I need in order to fight fentanyl and the influx of it coming into Clay County or even passing through, I literally need 20 more people in a real-time crime center. And when you think about the millions and millions of dollars I would need in order to accomplish that, the amount of money that is presented through the task force, wouldn't even scratch it. So we, as a task force, decided that the money available was best served in the way it was presented. So, thank you.
Would anyone else be wishing to comment? Okay, so Administrator, do you have everything you feel you need to go forward?
I think so.
All right, very good. With that, we will move on to that will conclude our discussion of the opioids task force. And of course, once again, thank you so much for the members who served on that and those who are not here as well, of course, for your dedication. And we will look forward to taking a deeper dive in this. With that, the next discussion item is airport operations. Administrator, would you like to introduce that?
Yes, thank you. So, Commission, we've had some discussions about the airport, and so we felt like it was an opportunity to provide an in-depth report to the Commission, some historical information about the airport. I think there were a lot of questions about the financial aspect and historical financial aspect of the airport, and then also kind of where we are today. There's some things that we've been working on with our FBO and with the Airport Advisory Board, so we want to bring the Commission up to speed on that. And so Donna Kuntz is here to talk a little bit. We also have the auditor who will also be presenting, and then we also have our fixed base operator, FBO, is here this evening, who will also be providing some information to the Commission and kind of talk about what the next steps are. So thank you.
Before we get started, I understand there may be a number of citizens who would like to comment on this and join in this discussion. We'll go ahead and hear from the three speakers first, and then if you could be kind of queuing up, and we will hear from each of you as we go forward. The other thing that I want to say is, if there are a lot of you commenting, please try to make sure that if you're going to be repeating what someone else has said, that you kind of just make it a bit brief so that we can have as many people comment as possible. The other thing is I would anticipate additional discussions on this subject, so I don't think that this is your last and only opportunity to comment. We certainly want to hear from our citizens on this. With that, please proceed.
Good evening. Donna Kuntz, Deputy County Administrator. And I apologize, I've managed to catch what half of our county employees have, and I guess it's my turn. So tonight we're just going to do kind of a little brief history overview. Our auditor has some historical financial information. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are currently and what's our next steps coming up. And I know the commission's very familiar with this, so I'm just going to do this real high level, but for those that are kind of listening. So in 1996, we opened our airport. In 2003, we did an extension on our runway to 5,400 feet by 100 feet. In 2009, we upgraded an instrument that helps us land with an automated weather observation system, short, that we call AWOS. In 2022, the commission approved that we went through and did a runway rehabilitation of the surface. I might also point out, even though we did that in 2022, the lifespan for that, which depends on air traffic, weight of traffic, means that every 8 to 12 years we need to redo this again. So I just want to keep that in the forefront, that that's something that we have to stay on top of, and that's an expense that we need to plan and look for again, even though it just seems like we just did it. In 2004, you guys approved for us our latest capital project that we're working on. There is a creek stream bank that runs along the edge, and it is eroding some of the surface, and if it gets too close to our runway safety zone, this could impede our airport operations. So we are working on stabilizing the Clear Creek that started last year. The engineers have done some designs on that project for us, and we are moving forward with that project. Also in 2024, we also moved to a fixed base operator. So we have Apex Executive Jet Center that is now our professional-based FBO that is providing hangar rental and doing jet fuels and overseeing our airport for us. With that, I'd like to have Victor Hurlbert, our auditor, come up and talk a little bit about our financial history.
All right, Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. Yes, so essentially from the discussions in January, my office went to work on pulling basically 15 years of historical financial information at the Midwest National Air Center, or the Clay County Airport. We have readily available records going back to 2000 in our accounting system. You know, earlier than that in the 90s would take a little more work. But I think from the discussions I heard 15 years. So that's the information that's before you. The first slide that you see here is really the bottom line up front. It's the overview considering all revenue sources from all funds, all expenditures from all funds, and then was the ending profit or loss. And this could also be, you know, looked at instead as a surplus or deficit, considering that the airport fund as we know it is technically not an enterprise fund. It doesn't operate as a business operation, so to speak, yet. And that's evidenced by the fact that it does have some losses. In fact, on our financial statements, the airport fund, or 401, is actually rolled up into the county's general fund. It does not have its own dedicated tax base or special revenue source. It's more these user fees that are supporting the airport revenue. I'll also make a comment that what's presented is done on a cash basis, accounting basis. So essentially what's presented is the transactions that occurred in the actual year. The reason we did that is we do accrual accounting on a fund level. So the airport fund 401 has accrual accounting, but then there are several sub-departments within the general fund, the use tax fund, and so forth, where we don't have accruals down to the department level. So I thought this to be the most consistent way in thinking of how to present this. I thought this to be the most consistent manner and to present this information. And ultimately, the fluctuations are smoothed out when we look at an average. And so what that tells us is that the bottom line is that the airport essentially does average a loss of about $258,000 a year. But it has had some positive years. 2 of those 15 years we can see 2017, for example, $891,000 in the green or black. Most recently, 2023, $211,000, in the green. And, it's worth noting that 2024 was essentially the first year of our current operations with a FBO. That term fixed base operator has a, hard and fast definition that I won't say that I know, off the top of my head. I will say that And working with council and other staff, I think we've had other FBOs throughout the history of the county, but none really, as I can gather, in its current status, where essentially the FBO is the management operation of the county. We've had FBOs that have operations in the county in that history, but never, not like in 2024 when we started the current FBO operations. And so that's why you see a great difference in the number there, because we've basically outsourced that management function. Again, a last note here on the overall analysis, 2024 isn't closed yet, right? We still have a couple months to look at the accrued, incurred activities to charge back to 24, be it both expenditures and any revenues, mostly expenditures at this point. But so I kind of give all that information, and now I want to just really drill down into the particulars. So let's look at specifically the main part of the airport funding, the Airport Fund 401. So that looks a little better. It does have an average in the green or black of about $23,000 a year. And more years than just a couple are operating of revenues over expenditures. And I think the reason for this is just evident by the fact that there have been subsidies, there have been transfers from the general fund, other funds to support the airport operations. So the Fund 401, in essence, the takeaway is that it can't operate on its own. If we look at sort of the major revenue sources in Fund 401 and really the airport overall, the largest, of course, is fuel sales. So we buy the fuel, and then we have a, we charge a little higher, mark it up to have any sort of profit. That's the largest revenue source. The next one are the hangar leases for tenants on a monthly basis. And then other categories here, the FBO lease is brand new in '24. We're still working on that as a county. Other leases are really the billboard advertising, the agricultural land that had been classified in the miscellaneous category in prior years. My team decided we want to better account and name that, so you can see in 21 forward it started showing up in other leases. You have interest, then you have grants and transfers, which came from the general fund. And so you can see when you look at some of these charts, really the highest year with the swings that really we can attribute to, in a lot of cases, grants or transfers there in 2016, 2017, but otherwise staying well within a relative range. Looking to the expenditures in Fund 401, the major categories are going to be, we have insurance. If we have personnel at the airport, there's insurance involved with that. We also have property casualty insurance, of course, that's charged to the airport fund. We used to have a community relations type operation. You can see personnel have not always been paid out of Fund 401. I've made note of this when I started here at the county in 2019, because I was actually interested in this question back then as well. Historically, the general fund actually paid airport staff. Up until 2021, or 2020, I should say, we made a switch based on the available resources and cash in the fund to start paying airport staff out of the Airport Fund 401. The non-personnel category includes things like buying the fuel purchases and other maintenance operations for the airport, whereas construction management is really what are the costs to do those grants. Usually it's on a reimbursable basis, so the county has to expend up front to then get reimbursed. And it can also include things like architectural and engineering along with those hard capital costs. And then debt service. The airport has debt from various revenue bonds that we've issued throughout the years, certificates of participation, and then refinanced over time. And so we charge that to the airport fund, and as you can see, it's been decreasing over time. In fact, 2025 is the last year of our debt service payment. So there's the expenditures. Again, similar story, I would argue. It's, kind of the ins and outs really deal with those one-time big grant revenues from the Missouri Department of Transportation. Okay, and so when you consider all those things, then we can see what is the cash standpoint of the Fund 401 by itself. And so it had really a nadir or low point of $6,000. At the end of 2012, at the end of 2024, it's up to $571,000 is how much cash is available in that fund. But now let's look to there is a department within the general fund called Airport Operations, 10920. And so this has been the main way that the county's been able to subsidize or support airport operations. You can see the revenues that we've flowed through the airport general fund department kind of come and go. They're usually larger projects, of course. And I'll note that there is an inconsistency in the history of the county. We've done it one of two ways. You can either transfer a bunch of cash from the general fund to the airport fund and then expend it out of the airport fund, or you can leave it in the general fund and expend it out of the general fund and get reimbursed in the general fund as well. It kind of depends, it's just really which is more convenient. I think a lot of times is what it comes down to, especially the scale. In 22, like what Deputy Administrator Kuntz referred to, that runway grant was a very large grant, over $3 million, and it's a 90-10 split. So what that means is the county actually has to come up with 10% of that grant, so roughly $300,000, $400,000 that's not reimbursed. The rest of it is 100% reimbursed. So the general fund will usually spend that full 90%, get all that 90% back, while the airport fund essentially covers the remaining 10%. In looking to the types of expenditures that come out of the general fund airport operations department, as I referenced earlier, that's where a lot of the personnel costs have exclusively been handled. We had some temporary personnel agencies for a few years, and as I mentioned, the capital grant has kind of flowed through that department. There are some other funding sources that have been used to support the airport besides just the general fund, and I outline these here with the data I have available. The use tax fund has done some capital projects in recent years. We can see in 2018, that was a sanitary sewer project, or actually, excuse me, that was trucks, some pickup trucks. 2020 was a sanitary sewer project. 22 and 23 are fuel trucks. The CARES Act, it was some very, very minor sanitation, cleaning supplies. ARPA, that was what was referenced to the Clear Creek stabilization project and the bonds. That was the last expenditure on our previous debt. We bought a hangar with that available bond money. And so I wanted to, besides seeing the overall all sources in, I think a lot of what the question with this discussion is, let's look at the airport on an operating basis. And so I tried to do that as best as I could. What I did is I essentially stripped out one-time monies of grants, any transfers, and for the revenues, then I'm just focusing on fuel sales, hangar leases, those other leases that we had, the billboards, the agricultural, and then the expenditures, just the personnel, what it takes to operate and run the place. And you can see the picture improves quite a bit, right? We went from roughly $258,000 a year on average of a loss or deficit to $76,000 of a loss or deficit. So that's a marked difference. And when you think about kind of the size and scope of the county's budget, that's very immaterial when you have over in excess of $100 million. From my perspective, that's essentially what I see. One thing I will leave with you before we jump to the next section. I didn't put a slide together on this, but it's worth noting that there is a lot of investment at the airport. Since the early 1990s. We received from some federal grants to build the airport, lay the runways. We went into debt to build the buildings, build the runways. All told, net of accumulated depreciation, the county has $20,650,599 invested at the airport as of the end of 2023. We're still working on 2024, of course, for the audit. That debt expires at the end of this year. There's only $32,000 remaining on it. The net position of the county, just to give perspective of that $20 million, was $135 million at the end of 2023. And the cash on hand, as I mentioned, was $571,000. So all told, if you were to put all those assets and liabilities together, basically 16% of the county's net worth is invested at the airport. And of course, as I've had discussions with others, regardless of the outcome or any decisions made by this body, certainly a lot of the grant funding would, require us to go back to the grantor agencies, any stipulations, work with council as far as, what can we do with these assets that federal money was used to acquire. But I just, I mentioned that kind of what is my takeaway, so to speak, on the airport's financials. With that, I think we'll move on to the next section unless there are any questions for me.
I think we might have a couple. Commissioner Wagner, would this be a good time?
This would be a wonderful time, and thank you very much, Mr. Auditor, for your work. And I am especially wanting to go back, if you don't mind, to your last table, because I think for me this encapsulates many of the questions that I have. And I do agree with your other comments at the end related to the assets that have been built up, and I would argue especially through the federal grants that we have received, and those are assets that one does not want to give back lightly, especially from a dollar value. So really, to me, it is the operation itself that is of most importance. And I guess I've got two questions for you. One is, I note some big swings that occur from time to time, if I'm reading this correctly. And I'm just sort of curious, in the course of your discussions and investigation, if there is some explanations for some of these swings. So for example, between 2018 and 2019, that's about a $290,000 swing. Between 22 and 23, it's, about $185,000 there. And so I'm just, and then of course you've got the whole, just the whole over time, what that profit and loss actually looks like. So I'm trying to understand if what is causing those swings, and is that a matter just of dates and when things hit? Is there something that you found in your investigation that may explain why those swings occur? And I'll give you a shot at that one.
Thanks for the question. I think the process here in trying to get to an operating type of cost, again, was removing grants, removing general fund transfers, and now on the expenditure side, I think that was more the challenge. Trying to quantify essentially what were all the grant costs. And so what we did is, I removed the fund 401-915, which is a department of the airport fund called construction management. Mm-hmm. So I guess, there very well could be, it'd be hard to really get to with absolute certainty of were there mixed in grant costs in some of those years in the operations department. Mm-hmm. It's possible. We quantify all those, of course, when we report to the federal government, but right. That's one idea. The other, it would be more theoretical than anything. It could be, what were we charging in terms of revenues? What were we spending on fuel? And then what were some of the maintenance facility type costs that we did repairs in those years? But it does seem to me that there are some notable trends, right? It seems to be, one way from 2010 to 2013. It seems to be another way from 2014 through 2018, and then another way, right. Very consistently. So that brings up some more questions, but those are really the best thoughts I have on that.
No, that's fine. But to one of the comments you said about construction management, that would also suggest capital improvements there, which I wouldn't necessarily throw in as part of operations. So is there a possibility that some of those major capital improvements are kind of locked in there as well, or is it difficult to say?
Well, for the most part, they should have been charged to that 915 department. Mm-hmm. But, based on available funding, how budgets were managed through those years, all I can say is that from seeing those expenditures come across, I think it could be likely that some capital costs got mixed in the 920, operations department.
Gotcha.
But I think there might be, something else there, given the duration of those trends. The kind of the one-time grants are only, a year or two at a time. Other grants are just entitlement grants that are recurring. So, but I think this gives a better picture of what is the operating. And I guess the takeaway for me is it's very close to being a break-even type situation. As it relates especially to the FBO arrangement we have now, are we that far off or are we close? That's how I would take it.
Well, and that was going to be my second question, just your opinion that the amounts are somewhat de minimis. I would argue that the 2023, 2024 numbers are, if you hit the 2020s and the 2019s, it's a little less so. But that's my opinion. But I guess your takeaway from this analysis is you're swinging pretty close on one side or the other. So from a financial position of the county, you were less concerned because of what that P&L seems to yield. Is that? And I don't want to put you on the hot seat. And if you have a different opinion, I'm totally happy. Well, yeah, I guess I am. But at any rate, he's used to it. He's been here 2 years with me, so he knows what he gets. But I am honestly, you look at these numbers. Are you concerned, or less so? I'll say it that way.
So I appreciate your question. I mean, I think the auditor's perspective is to just give you unbiased information, and then it's up to the commission to make that decision. I think I think when I initially looked at this back in 2019, I saw kind of the personnel issue, where personnel was just being basically supported by general funds. But that's what it takes to manage it. I think yes, it's a small percentage monetarily of county's budget. It's something we can easily absorb. We spend a lot of money on many other things that don't produce any revenue at all, and so that's kind of a policy question of is this something the county wants to continue providing. But yeah, I think from a accounting perspective, no, this doesn't concern.
No, fair enough. I mean, there's the philosophical aspect of business operations and supporting and not supporting, but I asked the question because I want to understand financially what's going on here, and I appreciate the work and the way you've sliced this up in so many different ways, and it's been very helpful to me, so thank you very much.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yeah, so thank you. Incredibly helpful, all these numbers, so thanks for compiling it for us. Back to the very first slide, if we could. I just a couple questions on that. The 258 per year, I think it was average, and the 3.8 million total since 2010. Do those numbers include the debt service payments from the bonds and the COP?
They do, yes.
Those are included as expenditures?
So the debt service will be charged to Fund 401. Yep. And so that's included in there, the annual debt service. But then as far as like bond proceeds, right? So available funding we get from that debt issuance. Really the only one that I have data on was that recent one for the hangar purchase. There really wasn't a ton of other bond expenditures in recent years. Admittedly, I do not have great information. The farther back we go, it'd take me some digging, but yeah.
Gotcha, yeah. No, I just want to make sure. So when we have the conversation around break even, and I'm curious other people's thoughts, yours and the commissioner and anyone else who has thoughts in terms of why we wouldn't include CapEx as part of that conversation. When we borrow money through a certificate of participation and then we have to pay it back, and that money went into the airport or wherever, the golf course, wherever the money goes, to me, we have to make payments on it, so we're paying that money. That's an expenditure that we didn't have to borrow the money, right? And but that's included. Any bonds or COP is included in expenditure side on this slide.
It is, and so, and a little more to that question, I would say, so this is more on the fund level, the actual numbers, actual revenues, expenditures, and cash. If we were to look kind of on the government-wide, net worth basis, we could add a depreciation expense each year. And so I tried to add that at the end of, what is our current net worth of, net of accumulated depreciation. And so, but yes, those are the bond proceeds as I know them that we've spent for the airport in recent years.
And then the ARPA funds and the CARES Act funds but on that first, they're included on that first slide as part of that overall figure?
That's correct. Yeah, we added all that in to get the overview or the bottom line. Yep.
Of the average, the 258 average slide and the 3.8
Yes.
million total included ARPA expenditures. I just think that's important too. Obviously, those are one-time funds and they were federal funds, but we could have used them differently. Specifically, we used them on the airport, right? So it is an expenditure to me. But if that's included, that's helpful to know. Yeah. Very good. Like I said, very helpful to me. I appreciate you spending all the time and effort on this. Thanks.
Good.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yeah, I see that it was somewhat profitable in the past. It seems as though when the pandemic hit, it kind of went to the dickens. And I can kind of seeing it rebound. Something that I want to share with y'all was that I took the time to go down to Lee's Summit, to their airport, which is kind of comparable to ours, not in location, they're right on a major highway, but they were of same size. And I talked to the gentleman who is their head of their FBO. The very same issues we face today at the airport are the very same issues he faced when he came in. And he took certain steps to make it profitable. And I see what Kyle is trying to do is the very same thing that this man did. You walk into that airport now, you don't see an empty hangar. And out on the, whatever you call it, the runway or whatever, there's planes tied down out there all over. When the chiefs come into town, you can't find a spot to park out there. It's loaded. Now, we're not going to see that because we're a little bit farther out, but we can pick up some of those things. They've got several big businesses that are there, and we've got one. Now, maybe we'll have another. But the bottom line here is, I think that we can turn this thing around. I've heard the statement that we shouldn't be subsidizing, and they're right. We should be making a profit on things, but look at the money we spend at the parks. Look at the money we spend on trails and walk paths. They're all over the darn county, and we don't see a one red cent come from those, but we do see a lot of man hours keeping them maintained and things of that nature. So I don't want this to be a good old boys club or just a service to the county and the county never turn a profit. I think with the right management, and I feel we have the right management now, we can turn this thing around and we'll start seeing profits, more people buying more gasoline. There's so much out there that we have to offer. And just driving back and forth from my home to the county here, I've seen more traffic recently around that airport, not today, but before that, you really are seeing more traffic. So I think more traffic comes down to more services, more gas sold, more tie-down fees, whatever else we want to charge. So I'm in total support of this. I think that it has to be monitored closely. I think we need to make some major changes, which Kyle is attempting to make. But all in all, I think we can turn this thing around and start seeing the $211,000 or many, many more dollars, on a yearly basis.
And I might make one comment you helped me think of there, Commissioner, and I appreciate
Pardon?
I might make one comment to that that you helped me think of too. One thing I certainly didn't look at because it's really kind of hard to estimate is, what are the property taxes attributable to, the airport? What are economic activity that's developed from there? That I didn't really go into. But, I looked at, really the county's coffers directly, so. So with that, I think, ready to.
Commissioner Johnson, you had something?
Yeah, a couple of comments. If you go back to the first slide again,
Yes.
Victor, I appreciate it. So I love the numbers. I love crunching numbers. And from what I'm understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the first slide is basically, that's everything. The last slide that you showed is basically the operating costs on a regular basis. And if I can use an analogy, my son is looking at buying a house, and so he's looking at how much it's going to cost every month, not only the mortgage, but the electric bill, that kind of stuff. And I said, yeah, that's what you need monthly, but when you need a new roof, that's going to cost you another 10 or 15 grand. You got to be prepared for. You need to repave your driveway or whatever it is. There's some big expenses that go along with owning a house, and you're responsible for those. And to me, this first slide is kind of what that is. This is the overall, this is your operating costs plus your big expenses that are part of owning an airport. This is what it's going to cost you to own an airport. Maybe, it's different every month and every year, but bottom line, this is what it's costing us to own an airport. You did bring up a good point about taxes and that kind of stuff. That's not factored in. That's really what I'd like to see is in what started this conversation is what are all the real numbers here? How much of it was talked about, are the taxpayers subsidizing this airport, and to what extent? The argument that the Commissioner Lawsonberg was about compared to Parks and Trails, I don't see that as a comparison because Parks and Trails are open to everybody in the county. Every taxpayer is welcome to go on those Parks and Trails. If you don't own an airplane, you have no business really using this area. If you don't have an airplane at this airport, you're probably not going to spend a whole lot of time there. So it's a select few people, and many of them are here tonight, select few people who are taking advantage of this. And I have nothing against that. But I think it's important to look at the real numbers. And like Commissioner Carpenter said, what we don't, what was it, a couple $1 million on a runway deal last a couple of years ago. That's still taxpayer money. Maybe it's not out of the general fund, whether it's a grant or what it is, it's still taxpayer money that could go somewhere else. So those are the kind of things I think are important to keep in mind. This slide here shows that on average, spending about $250,000 a year to run this airport. That's taxpayer dollars, no matter how you slice it, whether it comes through grants or anything else. It's basically $250,000 in taxpayers' money to subsidize this airport a year. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but on the big picture, we're talking new roof, everything. That's what it's going to cost us, or has cost us over the last, at least, 15 years here. So I think that's important to remember. Again, to your point, there's always going to be intangibles that can't always be put into numbers, and I'm sure we're going to hear some of those tonight. But some intangibles. One of the things we haven't talked about and that you brought up was property taxes. What does this do for the county and what does this do for the state? What kind of property taxes bring in, personal property taxes for owning a plane, that kind of stuff. I don't know. I think those numbers would be interesting as well. But I think the biggest thing we talked about, and I've heard the argument about public schools, I don't have any kids in the public schools, but I'm still paying for public schools. Actually, it's brought up a couple times in this meeting. And I think the concept is, well, it's for the greater good of the community. I think it's hard-pressed to make that argument for the airport. At least I'm not seeing it at this point. I'm not making a judgment on this. I'm just saying I'm not seeing at this point how this is a greater good for our community, spending $250,000. Again, that's not a fair statement to say that we're spending $250,000 in subsidies because we don't have everything included in here. But you get where I'm going with this. You get the gist of where I'm going with this. And owners, when you come up for your comments, understand that's one of the concerns that this commission has had, is how do we fix this? And with a fixed-based operator, what we're trying to do is make this work. we're trying to make an airport that works for everybody. So it's not completely subsidized. And if it's a minor subsidy by the taxpayer, it's not a big deal. If it was just a $75,000 like your last slide shows, I'm not sweating that too much. But if it's $250,000 on average, that's a little different. So how do we fix that? And the county's looking at how do we fix that? Well, maybe an FBO can help fix that. And if an FBO can help bring these numbers in a little bit better perspective here, that's what I'm all about. And so I guess my real position is, and I'm not looking to close down an airport, and I'm not looking to take this away from anybody. I would love to keep this airport, but I'd love to keep it running so that it functions a little better with less taxpayer money subsidizing this. And so what I'm really open to, I think we're really open to, is suggestions on how we do that. I don't own an airplane. I'm not out at the airport. I don't know what the issues are with this fixed base operator, with fuel sales, with hangar leases. Well, I don't understand that stuff as well as you guys who are actually in it understand it and what's fair and what's not. But that is the problem basically that we have on the commission. And so I guess I'm asking everybody else, and you just get to hear this, Victor, but I'm asking the rest of you, help us come up with a solution. If you have ideas, when you come up to the podium, because I'm guessing if you're going to want to talk, if you have ideas on how we can make this work, so it's a win-win. Win-win for you and a win-win for the county. And I don't know what that is. I really don't know what that is. And so that's what I'm hoping we get to tonight. I'm not hoping we get to, hey, how do we close down this airport? I'm hoping we get to, hey, how do we keep this going so it's a win-win for everybody? And I hope that kind of makes it clear where I'm at. I think there's a lot of commissioners that are kind of on that same mindset. I could be wrong, but I see a lot of people lined up to talk, so I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to say I agree with you. I don't think closing the airport is an option. So, I mean, that's just where my start is. So to kind of tag on to what Commissioner Johnson just said, it's not just we want to figure out how to make it work. We need to make it work. And I think that's something that we need to put our minds to. I'd like to get some more, I'd like to hear more about how other airports make it work and that sort of thing. That's not on tonight's informational part as far as I can tell, but I think that's something that would be important for us to understand is the operations of other restaurants, other airports more efficiently, more intimately. Commissioner Withington, I'm sorry, I will go ahead and recognize you now. Please proceed.
So looking at these figures, the airport has only made a profit 1 year out of the last 14, is that correct?
A couple, yeah. I think there's one snuck in there in 2017, and then...
I see that. Okay,
yeah,
so we've made a profit 2 years out of 14? That's not a good track record. But do we have a percentage breakdown of how much county money versus federal money we have for our expenditures?
Yeah, that'd be difficult because I can do that. I can certainly do that.
Yeah, I would like to see that because, we are one big decision from the federal government away from possibly not getting any more federal funding for this airport. And, we already talk about how we have budget restraints and can't even provide roads and bridges, because of our budgeting. So if we were to stop getting federal funds, because, if you think about it, I would say Lee Summit, Warrensburg, KCI, Downtown Airport, Wheeler, and some of these other ones are probably higher on the priority list for funding than our airport. So if we stop getting federal funds, then we're in a pretty big financial mess for this airport. So I would like to see what the percentage breakdown is of how much is federal and how much is ours.
Happy to do that. And I think, I pulled up this slide here, and this is just Fund 401. So there is some revenue in the general fund too, but you kind of can see in that grant column really an estimate of what that looks like. I mean, kind of ballpark figures. It's going to range from, close to 10 or, a couple percent to almost half, right? Like in 2016, it was up to half. And so what's the average, maybe around 10% or more ballpark. But yeah, we can certainly do that. And then, like I say, there are some general fund revenues to here. So we would add that in. But yeah, I'll get that for you.
Yeah, if you could get that, that'd be great, because, you know, a few years ago when the state was talking about pushing the lettered highways off onto the counties also, I remember, you know, this commission was against that and everything because we didn't have the finances for that. So that's one big worry that I have, is if we quit receiving federal funds, how are we going to maintain this airport when we can't even maintain some of our current government operations? So.
Did you want to speak, Commissioner Lawson? Okay, Commissioner Wagner?
Thank you. Just a couple of points. And I think the issue of grants from my colleagues is just as great a start as any. I mean, it strikes me that, again, I go back to, there is a difference between CapEx and OpEx, between capital and operations. Most of the large capital projects, if I'm not mistaken, are from federal funds. Those federal funds come from the ticket fees that everybody pays for any airport they go through, and they go in a pot and they get distributed. And admittedly, those are all competitive, but especially our runway projects have mostly come from federal funds, and we've got to do the match, which I understand. It strikes me that because of the way those are done, it doesn't necessarily matter in the general sense that they are taxpayer funds. They are, but they're only going to go for these sorts of purposes. So if we said we don't want them or we didn't get them, well, they just went to some other airport to go do them, right? So that's why I don't lock in on that, because whether you are in Lee Summit, KCI, or downtown, and Commissioner Withington is correct, it is competitive, and they could go get those funds, or we could, or anyone could, but I don't necessarily have a fear that they're just going to go away because of how they are generated, unless we just don't want airlines to have to be charged fees when they fly into various airports. So I do make a distinction, and so if that is work that you are looking at to answer that question, I guess the grant source becomes just as important as any, at least in my opinion. The other thing that I do have to point out, and I think it was also to Commissioner Johnson's point, I kind of want to just kind of stick a little pin in that, is, you know, the reason, or I'll say it this way, there is a difference, in my opinion, of operationally how you have to fund something if it is done by staff or done through FBO. If it is done by staff and county staff, our economic requirement is much different than if you have an FBO. I think that's kind of what brings this question is, and I know I'm dancing right in front of the next group of slides that may answer this question, but I'm just going to put it out there that if you have an FBO, the requirements of that FBO to make it financially feasible for them to operate a facility is much different than if we have somebody on the county payroll that does. Entirely different deal. And if you don't have someone available who can be a county employee to run that, and you are forced to then go outside of that, then you have what we have here. And so I just have to, I feel the need to at least put out there that in this conversation and question about how do you do operations over time and into the future, that answer is wildly different depending on who's actually the operator, whether it's us or somebody else. And so I don't think there's an answer or a question for you there, Mr. Auditor, and I appreciate you indulging me getting on my soapbox here, but I just have to put that out there, and I'll just be quiet for the next thing that...
Commissioner Carpenter.
Well, sorry to keep it going, but I do think we have to quickly have the CapEx, OpEx conversation, just because it seems to have bubbled up a few times on a few different issues. And so if we could go back to the first slide, Mr. Auditor, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. It was certainly my understanding that that was including county-controlled expenditures, as in dollars that we could have spent on other things out of the general fund, out of the airport fund, and out of ARPA and CARES Act to get these net numbers here. any one of those dollars we could have spent any way we wanted, right? So any general fund, airport dollar, et cetera. The significant occasional grants that we've gotten over the years, going back to, the origination of the airport, surely we're not counting those numbers on this, are we?
This only goes back to 2010, but it will, it's going to include all the general fund revenues and revenues.
Yes.
Transfers from general fund revenues, and then all the expenditures that were booked to the general fund, appear in the in expenditures.
But let's say when we got the multi-million-dollar resurfacing grant from the federal government, the portion that wasn't out of county funds, that was just straight federal dollar, and I'm not talking ARPA or CARES Act, because again, that's money we had control over. I'm talking about specific airport grant money like that one. We're not counting that toward our loss statement here, are we? Those federal dollars?
The expenditures that were reimbursed?
No, just the grant money, the whatever net total number of dollars we got from that 2022 grant, for example.
Yeah, those are in the revenues. Yep, the reimbursements from the grant. So it's a reimbursable grant. So we spend it up front, submit to Missouri Department of Transportation, and yeah.
No, thank you. No, I'm just trying to understand the grant money. We're not counting. You're counting that both in the revenue and expenditure line here. So take the 2022. Those numbers are extra big, right? And that's because we got the multi-million-dollar federal grant, right?
Yep.
And is that the one where we had the 10% match?
Yep.
So we're not experiencing that $2-point-something million grant as a loss, right? Because it was money that came in and then money we expended. The only loss piece would be the 10% matching fund piece, right?
That's right. So because both the revenues and expenditures that are reimbursed show up, they'd offset, they'd net to zero.
Yeah.
When we get to the 250,000 average or the far right column, I mean those two are going to wash out. So you could remove them both and drop each year by that respective amount. So it's grossed up here. Yeah.
Exactly. So to me, I don't see how thinking of the federal grant money in that way lessens the net burden that shows up on this first slide. I could, if I'm missing something or I'm misunderstanding, I would love to know. Seriously, to me, it's important to know, what these numbers are. And I think what I see here, I think I understand. But I wouldn't want to count amongst our obligation over the years, federal grant money that we got just for the airport, because I totally agree. Why would we count that as a loss to the taxpayers of Clay County? We wouldn't have gotten that money without the grant. So in my view, it seems like the 258 and the 3.8 million does accurately reflect the total money out from taxpayers, but certainly open to the conversation about it.
Commissioner Wagner?
Thank you. And I think what it boils down to, and it may or may not be, it may not be helpful at all, but at least it is for me. And the reason why I separate the two is because what you've gotten here, Mr. Auditor, is on a cash basis, correct? Everything here is cash. I spent it this year. This is what it is. Now, I tend to look at capital assets as not something that you count on a cash basis, but something that you accrue, because its life is beyond what you do for that single year. If I pay for a new runway, I expect it to be workable and last more than a year, but the operational amount that comes over time should go back to help, if you will, pay for that over the useful life of the asset. So in my book, and really it's about how you look at it, right? I don't look at those things on a cash basis. I'm more concerned about operations because what I consume is what I use right now. On a capital basis, like a runway, I'm using that or like the weather system that Donna talked about, right? That's supposed to be a 12-year asset, 9-year asset. So why would I count the cost of that and book that on a single year? I probably wouldn't. But that's how I look at it. It's for the same reason that when our colleague tells his son, you're going to have to buy a roof. Well, yeah, I'm going to pay for that probably over the course of a year, but its life, hopefully, is at least 30 years, depending on the warranty you got, right?
But that's philosophically how I look at it, and that's why I make that separation.
So I agree, counting it for 1 year would skew that 1 year's numbers dramatically and would be the incorrect way to think about it. But when we get like this, for example, and it's not just the airport, again, I've mentioned the golf course, other things, you know, when we spend $5 million in 2018 at the golf course, you're right, that $5 million is gonna last for a while. But then 2028 is going to come around and it's going to be time for another 5 million, right? And so over time, I feel like we can start to see through averages what it's going to be across time. And so when we have 15 years here, 15 years distributes across 15 years anyway, those big capital expenditures, and then we get the average of the 258.
Right, and I think to that point, the idea of making that capital improvement is there should be a commensurate increase in business, hopefully, that covers that improvement, right?
Right.
And so do you see over that time frame of whatever the asset is a commensurate increase in its usage? If it's stagnant, then that suggests I've made an investment that while, hey, that's great, but I could have used that money out of the general fund for something else. And so I'm just looking at it, you know, how are we actually tracking those assets? But to your point, I think there's got to be a commensurate usage that makes it worthwhile that you did make that investment, because it shows that's what was needed. That market needed that investment in order to improve its usage. So I think we're talking the same things. It's just kind of coming at it from a couple different angles. So
Thanks. Thanks.
Any further questions of the auditor before we continue? I see none, so please go forward with the discussion.
Donna Kuntz, Deputy County Administrator. So on current operations, I wanted to start with our annual fee schedule. Recently, in some of the conversations about the airport, a couple of comments were made, and I just want to do a couple of clarifications. The fee schedule is reviewed and adopted every year, and new numbers are brought back before the commission. And when these are projected out, we also do, you know, like a 5-year projection of like some other proposed numbers of where those fees may be in 27, 28, and 29. But recently, there was a comment made that those numbers are just proposed. They're placeholders. They're based upon what we think we may be at, but every year when these numbers come before you, we look at what's going on, what changes have been made, is there a good reason to make that change? For example, in 2024, we moved to FBO operations, and during that course of that year, part of what that FBO was supposed to do for us was to say, where are we compared to other airports? What should be a more equitable arrangement for the hangar leases? So that was brought before, and then there was a new number adopted for the 2025 fee schedule. I also heard somebody say, well, that means next year this is the number. Again, it's important to remember that every year these are placeholders, and we will relook at this each and every year to see where we're at. I also had heard a comment that we were losing our discount. So there was a clarification language put in the fee proposal, or the fee schedule, that if you pay for a year in advance, there's a 5% discount. If you pay 6 months in advance, there's a 2% discount. But that is paying for the current year that you will be paying those fees for. We had some people that wanted to come down to, in December, to go ahead and pay for the next year, maybe a full year, maybe 6 months, but they wanted to pay at the 2024 December rate. They did not want to pay at what was the newly adopted 2025 rate for the January. And really, they are paying forward, so they are paying for a 2025 rental rate. So we put clarification language in there that stipulates for the adopted fee schedule for that year. So I just want to make sure that we get that point clarified to get that corrected and make people aware of that. One of the other things we were able to do, and I appreciate the auditor helped us, we were able to go back 19 years and look at where we have for rental rates going back to 2006. And with these rate numbers, From 2006 for a small hangar, for our small hangars, 2006 to 2025, that rate increased over 19 years, a sum total of $140. And so when you just average that out by year, and frankly, some of those years we didn't even take a rate increase. So there were some years it stayed the same. That only came out to $7.37 a year. When we look at the large hangars from 2006 to 2025, we had an increase of $205. So that increase was coming up to $10.79 a year. So just to make sure that we kind of keep in perspective how we've been doing our rate increases. So it's like no increase or it's just been $5. One of the things that we're looking at, and we're talking about expenses, is we asked our FBO operator and the airport manager, Eris, went out and he counted light fixtures on the runway for us. So we have 70 light fixtures out on that airfield. Those light fixtures are bulbs on both sides. And so that comes up to 140 bulbs, but unfortunately those light bulbs are astronomically expensive. They are $450 each. So if we had to replace them every year, one bulb every year, then that would cost us $63,000 just for light bulbs, with a rate increase of saying we average $7. So to kind of keep that in perspective of what we're charging versus what we need to be maintaining, I thought that was kind of a good example, and that's just one minor thing. Now those bulbs do have a life cycle, depending on the type of the bulb, how many hours we'll get out of it. So I was just using an example of if we had to replace every single solitary bulb, what would that cost us? One of the other things we wanted to do is we wanted to kind of look, where are we compared to other airports? Every airport has different size hangars. So it was difficult to be true apples and apples in these examples because everybody has a different square footage on their hangars and everybody tends to offer different services. So what we tried to show is who's charging for lavatory services, who's charging for snow removal, what are you charging for a small hangar, and what are you charging for a large hangar? And this is where we really had to go to, because everybody has a small hangar and everybody has a large hangar. So this is really where we had to kind of really focus on where our comparison is at. And we are not the cheapest, but by far are we the most expensive. So we compared, and below our rates was St. Joe and Warrensburg. Then our airport was number 3 in rates. And then we had Johnson County and Lee Summit and Wheeler, all more expensive than what we are currently charging. We also asked whether anybody had fuel minimums. And it was no, except for Lee Summit. And they actually do have a fuel minimum. They have a actual rate, they have an actual theory as to how they calculate this, but their basis is that everybody should be flying 4 hours per month. And if you don't fly those 4 hours per month, based upon your aircraft size and what the rate of fuel should be, then they have a formula to charge 95 cents per gallon, which they then charge you at the end of the year to make up that difference. And even with these numbers that we have given you, on July, Lee Summit's rates are going up. So these are the current ones right now, but those numbers are all changing. On July 1st, their small hangar is going to be $505, and their large one is going to be $565. So it spreads the difference even a little further once we get to that point. So kind of where are we at and what's next? So these photos were provided by our FBO operator. These were some photos he took when he first moved in and took over some operations. And what he is trying to address. We have storage boxes, we have various planes with flat tires, don't look like they've moved. We have dust all over the planes. Doesn't look like anyone has flown or moved these planes in a long time. And this is one of the concerns that he brought back to us, is that we don't have an active airport. And when we brought in the FBO operator, we said we want a vibrant, active airport. We want to look more at economic development. What do we need to do to push our airport forward? So these were some examples that he brought to us. And so one of the things that we've been working on was we're trying to work with our Airport Advisory Board to have them assist us with a definition to bring forward back to the commission, is like, okay, what is an active aircraft? We've heard what Lee Summit defines it as, but we don't have a definition for it. So the Airport Advisory Board has met and did some brainstorming and has some draft language, and they are going to be meeting again next week to bring that back forward to the advisory board, any other interested hangar or tenants that would like to be involved in that, and see if they can fine-tune that and give us a definition, which we'll then be bringing back forward to you as commissioners. One of the other things we need to do is we need to, once we look at this definition, we need to then revise our lease. The first thing we have to do is we have to rescind the lease that we adopted in December, the 2024-363. Our apologies, but there was already supposed to be dropped the fuel minimum. And 3 different groups, 3 different sets of eyes, we're all looking at it, and we all read over that there was a 50-gallon a month fuel minimum that was written into the document. That was a super early draft, and that one was probably draft number 7, and it should have been pitched, but that's the one that made it to your desk. So we need to rescind that one. So we will be bringing forward a new revised lease with no fuel minimum in that. And hopefully at that time, if there is a clear definition brought to us, we'll be looking at what is considered an active aircraft so that we can include that into the lease language. One of the other things we're looking at is what's some of our other projects coming up for 2025. And one of the first ones, and we've heard this from our tenants, is that we have roof leaks. The weather's not conducive right now to fixing roofs, but it was already approved in the 2025 budget as part of our capital project that we have some money funded to do roof repairs. So that is one of our early projects coming up as soon as weather permits, to look and see which ones we are able to do. We had looked at some grant funding. We won't know if we're going to receive any of that or when we might receive that, but irregardless, we're going to go ahead with our capital dollars that you have approved for us to be working on the roof repairs. We also have with us tonight, and I don't want to interrupt in case there's any questions before I move on, but we also do have our FBO operator, Kyle Iser, is here to be able to also kind of tell us about current conditions and some of his thoughts and plans for the airport. So if you don't have any questions at this time, I will let Kyle come up to address anything.
I don't see any commissioners chiming in right at this moment, so please proceed.
All right, Kyle.
Good evening. It's good to be here. It's been about a year since we last met, so it's a pleasure to be up here. And appreciate Donna's comments earlier. I thought that I'd break up, just spend 3, 4, 5 minutes on current status of the FBO, where we're at and what our goals are. And I was going to break it up into short term and long term. Long term will take just a couple of seconds here. Short term, as Donna was alluding to, we really do want to help foster, an active user base at the airport. And so we've talked for a long time about trying to get a good, strong lease in place. And we do have a waiting list of approximately 40 people there. And so we would like to continue to be able to, bring in new folks. And so the lease does have language in there so that we can help
handle aircraft that are no longer in service and so forth. And we do appreciate the advisory board's comments on defining an active user, and hopefully we'll get that resolution here soon. One of the goals for Apex Aero Center that we are focused on this year is fostering events at all of our locations. We are trying to be a little bit more engaged with the community so that we can help youth come out to the airport, help with community engagement and so forth. And so you'll see a couple of those events this year as well at Midwest National. Donna's already talked about the rates. I do want to address the utility charge. I know that a couple of the users have mentioned those. It is simply us passing through the costs. To give you some rough numbers, in total utility charges across all the hangars, we spent about $43,000 on electric bills, and about a third of those are directly related to the T-hangar expenses. And so that is just simply a pass-through expense. As it relates to fuel prices, when we took over, we did actually lower the self-serve GA, self-serve avgas rates by about 40 cents, and jet fuel was lowered by about 30 cents as well. Obviously, it's a commodity, and so the prices increase and decrease, but it still remains below the 575 mark for both when we inherited the FBO. We are looking at further decreases for the self-service price. I mean, that's one of the requests that we've had from the tenants, and so we're going to explore that here in the next couple of weeks. As it relates to turbine aircraft, that's one of the things where we have a keen focus on, especially this year, is attracting business jets to stop in and out of the airport. We were selected back in July as a CAA preferred location. It's a vote, and so we won that, and it has been successful in us being able to attract transient aircraft that are looking for fuel stops. And just to give you a sense, take it February, for example, we've already surpassed the 2024 Jet A fuel sales numbers for the entire month, and we've already done that in the first 13 days, and so it is having an impact, and we saw similar results last month in January. Today, we actually just got a verbal commitment for a turbine-based aircraft, a business jet, to be based at this airport, so we're very excited about that, and we hope to be able to sign that agreement here in the next couple of weeks. In terms of new services, since March of last year, we have been in discussions with flight training facilities and maintenance facilities. We have not had a tremendous amount of luck on the flight training side. With maintenance, we have had an operator that has expressed interest in relocating to Midwest National. They actually have interest in building a hangar there. Obviously, discussions have been slow, and I can't guarantee that they're going to arrive, but we know that that is a service that we would like to have in place. If we shift out to longer-term goals, I think that everybody here, and the commission was stating this earlier, we really want the airport and the FBO to be a gateway for the community. That's really what our sole goal is. And we see this at all of the locations that we serve, especially when cities, EDCs, and so forth, when they are all engaged and they use the airport as a tool, that then helps generate additional business. And so we can give you many examples where businesses have said, hey, tell me about your airport. And we have the infrastructure in place. It's a very good runway. It's a long runway, can accommodate business jets. We have an ILS and so forth. So we have the right tools in place. And I think collectively, we need to do a little bit better job, and this includes myself, of attending meetings and so forth and advocating for, hey, this is the airport, make sure that your business constituents are aware of it, and I think that we'll all be able to succeed and leverage our resources. Leverage our resources here. So with that, I'll turn the time back over.
Commissioner Withington.
I just want to say thank you for all you're doing. Everybody's always said for the last year that you're doing a really good job, and so I appreciate everything you're doing up there.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you, and thanks for your hard work, and thanks for being here tonight. My question is really more into that business development piece. So what we have talked about from time to time here is, if you'll pardon the term, kind of the landlocked kind of aspect of this airport, between highways, creeks, and railroad tracks and these sorts of things. And so I want to, if you don't mind, be a little more granular in what we think the business development opportunity is, and if that is that more airplane, hangar-related sorts of things, are there other opportunities where locating at the airport can be facilitated, knowing that there may be some limitations as far as land use, for lack of a better term? Can you kind of speak to that to maybe set our expectations properly?
Yeah, well, I guess it kind of depends on what you're referring to. Like in terms of aviation activities, I feel like there's a tremendous amount of land to be able to, be developed. So, if we were able to continue development with corporate hangars, for example, there's ample land there. If there's a maintenance operation, if there's other aviation activities, Midwest National can certainly, support that. There are other airports that get involved in industrial parks, for example.
Right.
And, I candidly don't know what the dynamic is, like if the county owns land around, but, that is, again, when you look around it, I feel like there's ample land there as well. Kearney, Excelsior Springs, and so forth are very close, and so I think that you can leverage those communities as well to be able to do some business development to help support the airport. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
Just to follow up on that, I kind of see economic development having two kind of classifications, one being within the confines of the borders that Commissioner Wagner just mentioned, but also the economic driver that it can be outside of to encourage more businesses because of the asset and the amenity that it represents.
Yes.
So you've got kind of two different tracks there in my mind.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson?
Oh, thank you. So talk a little bit more about this, and maybe you can't say too much, but on this new business, will they put in a new hangar? They'll utilize what we've got already? Oh, that's good.
Yes.
That's good. What kind of a idea is it? What is it?
It's a light business jet.
I'm sorry?
A light business jet.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other presentations to be made?
No, that concludes the staff's presentation.
With that, if there are members of the public who are here, and certainly I apologize for the lateness of the hour, but on the other hand, there was a lot of, I think, very good information that was imparted. If members of the public would like to weigh in on this and make comments, I'll kind of queue up a little bit so I can sort of make sure I've got everybody taken care of. Once again, when you come up to the podium, please make sure the green light is on, identify yourself and address your comments to the commission, and we'll try to make sure everybody who cares to be heard is able to take some, is able to be heard. So please proceed.
Great. Hi, I'm Dr. John Owen. I've been a physician can you hear me?
No, a little louder, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I've got the same hoarseness that someone else had earlier. I'm Dr. John Owen. I'm the physician in the county here since 1988 when I got out of the Air Force. Practiced continuously in this area. I might be able to give you a little historical perspective. I was on the airport advisory board for a couple of years before the first shovel of dirt was turned. So if I could, just to summarize a little bit, in this very room and the room next door, we worked together very closely with the commission at the time to develop a plan. And I've got to say the plan was much more strategic. It was to bring economic development in. That location was actually chosen, the question about the rail, that was chosen because it represented a unique opportunity to have rail service, highway service out to the interstate, and air service. The property was chosen and distances placed on Rodas Road and elsewhere to allow warehousing along that area there to the east of the airport. And so, and on the north end, where there is a single hangar, that was envisioned to be a large development of industrial and private or industrial type of hangars, but not only aviation related directly, but the type of things that you see at Lee Summit. Lee Summit, whenever we built our airport, was much smaller, actually. It was a smaller airport where they actually turned down development until they had a change in the city structure. You can see what's happened there once they've reinvested in it. The question about what is the value of our airport compared to some of the others that were mentioned, when we went from 4,000 feet by 75 feet wide to 5,500 feet by 100, that was actually, we are designated an emergency reliever for KCI. That airport is weight tested for a 737, and so Lee Summit is not. So with the question about Lee Summit being more important, I believe that could be an error, that we actually do have a very valid reason for doing that. The tactical, the pieces that are discussed here, I think are very important. That's tactical. Again, I've got a long military background, served in the Air National Guard for 24 years after getting off of active duty. What I think the important part that we need to keep our eye on is the strategic part, which we've started talking about here, is using that as a tool. In the past, we've used it to bring just-in-time parts for Ford Motor Company. They used to fly in very regularly with parts. I think that type of thing needs to be developed. I think that we see businesses come in, the industrial park that we already have a few miles down the road. They use this facility. They fly. We see business jets come in and out. It's a great resource. It's a great potential economic development beyond the point that it is. We have air ambulance that regularly uses the space. It's a Angel Flight type of, in addition to the air ambulance that stops regularly. So I think that I just want to make a plea that, again, while the day-to-day numbers are very important, that the strategic value of the airport, not only into the day-to-day life of every citizen in the county, is very important. And then I think to develop and bring in more business, I think it will follow if we keep our eye on the strategic goals. The property taxes were mentioned. That's a real thing. I pay it every year. Sales tax is crazy high. I mean, the money, and there's probably 20, I'm just guessing, 20% of the plane's turnover a year. They're paying a lot of sales tax. Unfortunately, I have done that recently. So again, I think that there's a lot of revenue that this airport generates that the numbers tonight, while very responsibly put together, may just not see. So again, thank you for each of your service. I appreciate the opportunity to say.
Thank you very much for your historical perspective, and you're bringing the broader interest of what happens at the airport to our attention. Okay, Commissioner Johnson?
737.
That's correct.
Can land at that airport?
Yes, sir.
I never knew that. I thought they took over 7,000 feet to land.
No, we used to land KC-135s on 5,500 feet, and it's a lot heavier.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that. Thank you.
Next citizen, please.
My name is Ed Duckworth. I've been in aviation for a little over 50 years now. I'm a corporate pilot for 7 years, airlines for over 27 years, retired American Airlines captain. Used to run a little rinky-dink airport up here for a number of years, Roosterville. And we were in it for profit, and we had more hangars there. I think there's 53 there now, but it's not the same kind of airport. The airport, what I see right now being compared with St. Joe, Lee Summit, Johnson County, I forgot the other airport you mentioned, they all have more than one runway. They all have more than 2 approaches. They all have flight schools. They all have maintenance facilities. The last person I saw try to promote the airport into growth, I mean, Roosterville's got maintenance. When I bring my airplane into Clay County, if I have something break, I gotta pay a guy to drive down from Cameron, Missouri. Or I gotta fly my airplane to Cameron and leave it there for 2 weeks while he works on it. That's ridiculous for the amount of money and what we have there. The last person I've seen that actually promoted this airport is more than just a bedroom community airport, because that's what it is. As far as I've seen the FBO, they sell gas and trying to make up more money on hangar rents. Eventually, you're going to run the the bedroom community out of business because it's not profitable. Maintenance, big maintenance could go in there. You could bring 737. I used to fly an Airbus into a 5,500-foot strip out in Orange County, out in California. Lots of times you could land. Nobody's ever promoted that. The only actual operation there I've seen is Central Air Charters, which is fine, and they're there because of probably the cost. And they're probably the biggest gasoline buyer there. But no, you're comparing apples and oranges. I've taken my airplane over to Lee Summit to get work done. I take my airplane to Johnson County to get work done. All I've got there is a hangar and somebody to sell me gas. To me, that's not an FBO. The last person I've seen that tried to promote the airport up, and he ended up going off to greener pastures, was Colin McKee. And that was back around 2007, 2005, somewhere around there. And he really promoted it. He went after jet operators, called them up. All around. It's pretty neat. We had a lot of jets come in there for a while. And he tried promoting other things. And like I said, he went on to greener pastures. But no, right now, it seems like, I mean, you could walk in the office there, used to be at least nice chairs and a TV set and a pool table. It's just gas sales now, and that's it. And just trying to make more money out of the hangars, the bedroom community airport it is. I think, well, I don't know. I'm not into all the details of what you have to do. I think there needs to be a little bit more investment in going after flight schools, because I know a lot of flight schools, they're looking for a place they can operate. And you do have two approaches there, which is nice. You got an ILS and a RNAV approach in there, which is sort of neat for a little airport. That's pretty nice. But it's just nothing being used. So I'd like to see somebody to come up with a promoter, get it promoted. Having parties there or air shows isn't going to make any more money. It isn't going to draw any more business people in. Maybe politically it's good, but not bottom line. I do really believe that I said I'm about the point, the hangar rent's about ready to make me get out of it entirely. I'm paying I got a big hangar. And it's just, I have a hangar in Arizona right now that's bigger. It's at Falcon Field in Mesa. It's got 3 restaurants around it. We got a fire department there, emergency services, a control tower, 2 runways, and I'm paying $425 for a bigger hangar. So just keep raising the rates. That, I don't think is the answer. But like I said, we only have 1 runway. All the other airports you brought up got more than 1 runway. Something happened here a couple of years ago that I couldn't believe it. My airplane was held captive for 2 months. They shut the runway down to resurface it. I had to pay my hangar rent for 2 months. Now, if I've got a light business jet, $20 million jet, and they lock my airplane down for 2 months, I'm gonna look for another airport. I'm not gonna, and another 7, 9 years, whatever, they do it again. How can you can't absorb that. So I don't know what the answer is on that, but I do know it's not ran as a business. It's ran as it's a bedroom community airport. Everybody up there I know, I mean, there's some people, well-to-do people got nicer planes, but not much business going on. Central Air Charters is the business, and they're probably not gonna last a lot longer. Anyway, that's all I had to share.
There were a couple of questions for you. I had one, and then Commissioner Lawson, I think, wanted to. You had mentioned the maintenance part of it. My understanding is, by talking to members of the Airport Advisory Board and also people who own airplanes, and that is, if I understand correctly, it's not just a matter of doing the maintenance, which obviously is very important, but the inspections that have to be done.
That's it. That's
you
big
don't
part.
just sort of, it's not like when we take our car in for inspection. It's a bit more involved in it. It's I've heard that they have to be taken to another airport. That does take a couple of days, and there's a high level of inconvenience. So apart from being a revenue source for some kind of repair mechanic shop, it would also be tremendously more convenient for other folks who.
Like I say, your airplane breaks there now, you're in trouble, especially if you're not I'm connected. I know a lot of people all over little airports. But if somebody just moved in with a little airplane break, they're out of luck. I mean, good luck getting it fixed. My friend here, Mike Philpotts, also a retired American captain, and he had to take his airplane, well, about 3 months over to, what was the airport? Interject, for radio work. And then he'd been sitting at Roosterville here the last couple of months to get maintenance done on it again. And he couldn't get it back because of weather and everything else. And I've had to take my airplane places. But yeah, everybody's got an annual inspection. Every airplane there, once a year, that's minimum, has to be inspected. That's usually between 2 and 5 day operation if you can get an opening for it. Sometimes longer if they find problems. But yeah, just the maintenance aspect of it. And you can rent a lot. You can rent a maintenance hangar if somebody put the capital up to build it and then draw somebody in. You can rent a lot, those for pretty good money, because they make a lot of money. And flight schools. You know, why do flight schools have it at downtown airport? You could draw that flight school up to Clay County. I'm pretty sure you could. I know people who run them. If it was a little bit cheaper, but they charge a lot of money down there for a big hangar. You're talking, you know, probably as much for one big hangar as the whole airport makes. So.
Commissioner Lawson?
The only thing I was going to say, one of the things I did notice when I was at Lee Summit, when you went into the main hangar, they had 2 different, they call them FBOs, and they were mechanics.
Right.
And that's all they did. They just worked on planes.
Yes.
So I think that is something that we need to concentrate on and try to get someone there that maybe is not under Kyle, but just a separate FBO that does nothing but work on your planes. That way you don't have all this down plane. We sell more gas, it becomes more profitable. But I think, you know, he's really trying, and I think one of the things we need to try to do, you guys have been through so many different managements and all of that. I flew in on this will date me, I flew in on the first plane that landed there, and it was an old TWA plane, some kind of, it was an antique.
Connie?
And boy, it felt like it. And they landed there, and it was just the neatest thing, you know.
Northrop Alpha.
So you know, there's a lot that can be done out there, but I think the first thing we've got to do is get it as an active airport where people, if their planes are down, they get them fixed right away there, and that the people that are hangering there are all active flyers. And it'll make it a lot better because we'll have a bigger group of people making more money and be able to do more things.
Flight
But
schools bring in a lot of money too.
I appreciate you staying with us as long as you have, and we hope you'll be there a long while.
Well, I'm not a good public speaker, but it's just my opinion. The flight schools, we used to run 4 airplanes at Roosterville. Our little dinky, this is back in the 70s. And they flew 80 hours a month apiece. Add that up at 10 gallons an hour. That's our little flight school. And you can draw in and look at downtown, you got 3 big flight schools down there, and they burn, I don't know how many thousand gallons a month per school. And that would bring it up. And that way people wouldn't have to just make it up on the hangars, which seems like what they're doing right now, which seems not fair. But anybody else have a question?
I see none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next citizen, please.
Yes, my name is Gary Ewert, and I've had an airplane out at Midwest National since 2013. And it's an amazing airport. The facilities are great. But from a business point of view, I'm amazed how underused it is. I wish I could put this up on the screen, and I'll pass my phone around if you guys would like to look. But I visit my daughter who lives in Keller, Texas. And there's a little airport called Hicks Field. And you can look it up if you would like. The airport designator is T67. And they have a runway that's not near as nice as what Midwest National has. And they have 4 rows or 4 parallel taxiways parallel to the runway that are actually longer than the runway. And each one of those rows is packed with full-size hangars, not T-hangars, but full-size hangars. A lot of those hangars have businesses in them. Some of them are privately owned, and people actually have apartments in them, and they live at the airport. But anyway, I wish I could put this up on the screen. I don't know if you're interested in seeing it or not.
I am. Okay, would it be possible for you to email it to the administrator? And then
I probably can do that, yes.
And then if you wouldn't mind forwarding it to the rest of us, that would be
Yeah, if
helpful,
I could get a card with the email address.
That way we'll have it permanently in our computers.
We've already had 2 speakers that have talked about the business aspect, and the personal property tax is a big deal. And that's not accounted for in your figures. And if those airplanes go away, so does the property tax. A lot of those airplanes, even the small ones, are now $1 million. And I don't know what the property tax is on $1 million, but I wouldn't want to pay it. Ours is a much older airplane, so it's not near as high. We've also talked about fuel prices. And there's a law of diminishing return on raising the fuel price. I got numbers today from a computer app called AirNav, and they list fuel prices. And I checked the fuel prices on some airports in our vicinity that are comparable to Midwest National. Grain Valley is 50 cents a gallon cheaper than Midwest National. Lee Summit's 42 cents a gallon cheaper than Midwest National. Roosterville, that we just talked about, is 71 cents a gallon cheaper than Midwest National. Kansas City downtown, if you go to the self-service pumps, which is basically what Midwest National has or had until they got a fuel truck, but I don't use the fuel truck anyway. I'm only self-service. It's $1.02 a gallon cheaper. Now, I'm sure that Kansas City downtown probably buys more fuel, so they probably get it for a little bit better price, but Roosterville doesn't, and they can sell it at 71 cents a gallon cheaper than Midwest National's selling it for. I have a son who lives out in Denver. When I come back from Denver, it's very tempting to land at Kansas City downtown and fuel up and then fly to the airport, because I'm going to buy 50-some gallons of fuel. That's $50. And I don't get to fly enough anyway, so an extra takeoff and landing is not something I really don't want to do. We fly our airplane in about 120 hours a year, and every 40 to 50 hours we do an oil change. Every year that I've been there, we've been going down to the FBO and we buy oil. This year, when I went down to do the last oil change, I was shocked at the price. And unfortunately, in a free market, I can go somewhere else and buy my oil cheaper. Is that really helping the bottom line of the airport when I do that? I would rather buy my fuel and my oil at Midwest National. But I can just barely afford to operate an airplane anyway. So I look for every single chance I get to save a few bucks here and there. And the maintenance is also an issue. I've never had our airplane come out of an annual inspection in less than 2 weeks. So, and for probably close to $7,000. So that's, luckily we still have a connection on the field where we get our work done on the field. But the mechanics at Midwest National are all getting older, upper 70s, and the one that used to do our maintenance quit because he's in his 80s. And I don't know where we'll go if we lose the guy that we have now. So anyway, there's a lot of ways this airport could make a lot more money than it is. It's just basically an underused asset is what the problem is. I mean, you look at Grain Valley, it's already been brought up, Lee Summit. They have hangars all over the place. people doing business and making money, paying taxes, but that's not happening at Midwest National. Something needs to change. You were looking for more revenue. Well, that's the way to do it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
I do not see any questions. Thank you. Next citizen.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. My name is Jason Patterson. I have an airplane at the airport, obviously. The airport is really great, right? That's where I learned to fly. That's where my daughter took her first flight. We talk about flight instruction. My daughter's now in Tulsa and I'm paying $100,000 for her to learn to fly commercially. That's money that nothing is happening at our airport. Downtown's capturing that revenue. She flies 30 hours a week, burning 10 gallons an hour. Like, do the math on the profit and that type of stuff. Like, the county has unfortunately mismanaged this airport for so long. And I think Kyle's gonna do his best for the most part, but there's so many opportunities that need to be addressed. I do have some complaints though with the new FBO. On January 1st, my credit card was charged a different amount. No one bothered to email me. You have my email, you have my address. All of a sudden my credit card's $405. I saw on a slide that says it's $380. So which is the real amount? Because my credit cards changed differently. No one bothered to let me know anyway, you know, frustrating. And then just after I learned my hangar rentals went up, we have a snowstorm. And was I able to get my airplane out? No, the runway was down for, I don't know, 5 days. There was giant snow drifts in front of every one of the hangars. We have pictures of all that stuff. So we're paying and we're just getting bled dry. We want more money from us. And we're not getting the services. Lee Summit wasn't closed for 5 days. You know, sure, people pay a little bit more. I'd pay a little bit more to get my plane out every day because every time it ices, I have a hangar that faces towards the north. Guess what? Iced in, can't get the plane out. But yet, I don't see a break in my hangar rent. I think that, I hope that it gets a lot better. But the mismanagement of that asset that's millions of dollars we've invested in, the government, the federal government has invested in, Clay County's benefited from 10%, you pay 10%, you get 90% free money from the government to do stuff. And all that's happened is nothing. It's just deteriorating. Platte County doesn't have an airport. You know, think of this crown jewel that you guys have that you can maximize instead of just let it turn to trash.
Thank you. Next citizen.
Hi, my name's Patrick Hupp. So I've only been flying about 4.5, 5 years, but I learned it at Midwest National. I've talked to a couple of folks here. I've talked with lots of folks. And the point of that is aviation is a small community. So about 3 years ago, we watched a decline in jet traffic because there's a lack of staff at the airport. In fact, one story of a jet showing up and having to fuel itself at the self-serve pumps and having to reposition. So starting a jet, if you've ever talked to a jet pilot, is not necessarily a small feat. And had to reposition so he could fill up the other tank. So he showed up, called an after-hours line, got no response, and frustration. Again, small community. So that word of mouth got out. When we want to talk about bringing economics back, we have to change that narrative. What we've got going on right now is not going to change that narrative. It's just further fueling it. So aside from flying out of Midwest, I work down at IXD and manage an avionics shop down there. If what happened to me down there happened, like what happened up here happened to me down there, I would have lost multiple days of business. My concern of the snow is not, so I'm gonna take a little different edge here. The joke in aviation also is, you know what the cheapest thing about flying is? The pilot. The owner. We want to complain about money, then that's fine, but we own an airplane. My concern is safety. And when I expressed my concerns about safety to our FBO, which I'd like a clarification on that. Are they FBO or are they management? Which one are they doing for the airport? Because if they're an FBO, the FBO is not responsible typically for snow removal and making sure the airport is good. But if they're managing, then they are responsible. So that, I think, is an important clarification point. That when I arrived at the airport on Thursday night, 5 days after the massive snowstorm, that airport was atrocious. It was open. The NOTAM had expired, and if jet traffic had come in, even a small airplane had come in, we would have had an issue, and the county would have been held liable. That was where my phone call started. I urged the airport manager to close the airport and was ignored until 8 o'clock the next morning. So I'm coming from a safety standpoint of, if we really want to grow this, we not only have to change our narrative, but we have to start taking things serious from those of us who are there. You want a thriving population that flies? Make it inviting to those who want to come there. We have flight schools that bounce up from downtown and do touch and goes all day at our airport. We have flight school from Lee Summit who bounces up and does touch and goes at our airport all day long. Why? Because it's a great place to come and land. It's a great airport. The traffic tends to not be as heavy, but it's a great runway. It's a great facility, and it's always been a friendly facility. In fact, most of the people out here, I think we've either hung out or talked, and again, it's a small community, so I'll keep going back to that. But I feel like we're trying to drive business in, which is great, and we're talking about that, but we're not trying to maintain the business that we have. It feels like we're just trying to drive up what we can to make a buck right now and make that short-term goal happen really fast. But the long-term goal, if we turn over every person in that place, we're going to lose what community we have. And again, that word of mouth is going to get out. So thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Next citizen, please. Oh, I'm sorry. No, there was a question, sir. I apologize. Did you have one? Okay, Commissioner Johnson?
I'm just for clarification, who was responsible for our snow removal at the airport? The FBO does. And you contract out a company to do that? Or you yourself?
If you're going to respond, please come up to the mic. And gentlemen, there's another question for you after this is over.
No, we use the county equipment, and so we've made it clear that, okay, so there were two events. We had the first major snowstorm that had 10, 11 inches, right?
Yeah.
The two of the three pieces of equipment broke. The runways were clear. I'm not specifically sure what days he was referencing, but the T-hangers did take a very, very long time. And we finally got Donna to provide a contractor to finish clearing, most of the ramp and the T-hanger area.
So normally you would do that, or your staff would do that with the equipment that's out there?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So,
gentlemen, we did have a question for you, please. Commissioner Wagner?
Yeah, Mr. Hupp, I'm so glad to see you because I was one of the folks that you talked to. And then I lost the email that you gave me. So before you leave tonight, what's your email?
We'll connect.
So I can do what I said I would do for you.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Yep.
Next person, please.
Yes, hello. My name is John Stoll. To be clear, I am a employee of the FAA. I'm an aviation safety investigator. I also do rulemaking, and I'm actively involved in a rulemaking called the Modernization of Special Airworthiness Certificates. But for those who don't know, last summer, the FAA put out a notice of proposed rulemaking saying that we're going to change the rules for small general aviation for what it takes to make for pilot certification, mechanic certification, and for basically the different operation privileges for those type of pilots. And the overall, it is a less burdensome, less government oversight of aviation. And it's going to make it easier to get your pilot certificate to fly general aviation airplanes at a lower, instead of 40 hours right now, which is at national average about actually 80 hours to get your pilot's license. It changes that so you can now in 20 hours get your license, which in reality is still about 60 hours of actual to get the proficiency needed. But the minimum requirement is 20 hours. And it allows you to do things without having a medical, you can use your driver's license, and some other specific rules. But the bigger part of it is flight training. The expectation of the rule is you can now do flight training in these type of airplanes. And so the intent of the rule is to get people into aviation, get them flying with lower time and stuff and that type of thing. So we expect that flight training is going to become a much bigger market. Also, if you look around the room, not calling out anybody, but the age of the average pilot is getting up there. And there is a pilot shortage of basically pilot and mechanic shortage in the future because we're losing more than we're bringing in because of a lot of things, cost and that type of thing. So there is a big need for bringing in flight schools and that type of thing to airports. So if you could get flight training into the airport, that would definitely be one thing that would be beneficial. The other thing was, I'm sure it was probably more facetious, but as far as a good old boys club and that type of thing, airports kind of get that impression because yes, it is kind of a good old boys thing, and it is kind of very much like the airport people really use the airport. Joe Blow citizen doesn't really necessarily even know where the airport is. It's kind of the same as like a marina. The boat owners all get the benefit of the marina, but do the people really need the marina? That type of thing. But I would look at it as, I have a friend who lives in Lawrence. Him and his wife routinely fly into Midwest National. They land here, they go to Sulphur Springs for some restaurant they like, or they come down here to Liberty for some restaurant. So there are people, and also you probably query everybody here, what's the best restaurant to fly out to? People fly to Wichita. There's all different restaurants and stuff like that people like to visit. So there is some financial, the restaurant benefits from a little bit of money here and there. So there is a little bit of that. But it's also, if you can afford a boat, you can afford a second car, you can afford an airplane. It may not be the top of the line speedster, but it isn't necessarily a rich man's game. It's kind of one of those things, if you want it, you can do it type of things. So I wouldn't want you to come away with the perception that it is just rich people and their toys, because it's not necessarily, there are people with rich toys and stuff like that, but the majority of it is still, just people having, interest in certain things. And the last one I had was, probably not the best thing to say considering the financial report, but sometimes, as Kyle mentioned, there's a waiting list of 40 people trying to get into the hangars. And if you called up Lee Summit, there's probably 40 people. You call up any airport in not even Missouri, my dad's in South Carolina, there's hangar waiting list everywhere. Because people want to put airplanes in hangars because it protects your investment versus having it out on the ramp. So there's now, with also going back to the rule where we're trying to allow more people, bring more people into aviation, you're gonna have more people with airplanes, more people want to put things in hangars. So in an effort to spend money to make money, if you consider building more hangars, you then get you accrue more rent, and you also get that extra fuel from all the other airplanes burning fuel. So in fact math, I did just sitting here, if you did build 30 hangars at $320 a month, it's close to, it's about $9,600 a month that you get in, about $115,000 a year. So, once you pay off those hangars, everything after that is then profit. You could look at how much do the hangars bring in, from 2016 or the 10-year study, how much have we recurred in hangar rent versus how much have we paid on those hangars. So it's maybe not the best way to look at things, but as a way to bring people in, you bring more people in, you get more interest and all that type of thing. So again, not telling you what to do, just some things to consider. So thank you.
We do have one commissioner. Commissioner Johnson, I think, had a question or comment.
Yeah, actually not for you. I'm wondering, do we have a hangar waiting list, and how long is it?
Yeah, it's about 40 people.
40.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Did you have any more to comment?
No, sir, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming up this evening.
No problem.
Any other citizens wishing to comment? I see another making his way forward. You don't have to worry, Will. Don't rush, we'll wait for you.
Mike Philpott again. How many tax-paying households are there in Clay County? I hear Commissioner Withington always saying there's 250,000 people that subsidize that airport. Is that how many tax-paying households we have?
How many do you have any ballpark on that? But the thing is, there are roughly 250,000
Okay, and so
citizens.
the airport's deficit every year is $250,000? So public math, is it $1 a household a year to have access to that facility? Is that what we're talking about, $1 per family per year? Is that right?
Mr. Johnson?
It sounds like a lot of money, but I pay a lot of taxes, and all of them are more than $1 a year.
Yeah, that's probably, if you want to put it that way, I mean, if you're talking every child and everybody paying $1, it's about $1 a year, which is about maybe 3 police officers more we could have on the streets as well. That benefit everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, $2 or $3 a year per household. And do my personal property taxes, are they, for my aircraft, do they go to the airport at all?
Very partial.
Excuse me. When you inquire of somebody and inquire of the commission, we certainly would have to have the auditor come up, but he needs to come up and identify himself so that his comments are heard.
Do you mind? Yeah.
Mr. Auditor?
Yes, so very partially, our property taxes go towards a lot of political subdivisions, school districts, cities, and so a very small amount of those personal property taxes would end up in county revenues. But it brings a point that supports a lot of, local governments in the area, all the property taxes.
Okay. All right, that's all I had, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other citizens wishing to comment? Please come forward. And go ahead and re-identify yourself for the audio-only recordings.
My name is Ed Duckworth. I previously spoke. Just an idea, the gentleman that talked about building more hangars. This is just how I used to build hangars. I used to put a big piece of cardboard on a wall and draw out a hangar with how many slots I had. Usually I built 7 at a time, and we had built 20 at a time.
Please speak a little bit more into the mic.
We built 20 hangars at one time, and anybody wanted to pay a year in advance, they put their name on a hangar. And I literally sold out 20 people 1 year in advance, which paid for half the hangars. The second year it broke even. I don't know what the break even in these hangars are, but I bet it's pretty good business. I'd like to build hangars up there and make money on them, but I know it's not my business, and I don't want to do it anymore. But yeah, that's how we used to. I'd go to the bank and I'd show the banker. He'd come up the other half because I was always broke. But no, but hangars are a good way to build a lot more money, and you're going to have more fuel cells, be more attractive for a maintenance to come there. Just an idea. That just crossed my mind while he was speaking.
Thank you for your observations. Yes, sir?
Hello, my name's Isaac Schultz. I'm an aircraft owner and pilot out at Midwest National. I'm a young guy, I'm a pilot. I'm just starting my career in aviation. Right now I pay the bills working at Quick Trip. My airplane is a small airplane I built in high school. And right now I'm doing some maintenance on it out of the hangar. And these continual price increases for my rent, they're really hurting my career and making it hard for me to be able to keep my plane at Midwest National. I'd love to keep flying there, but with the trajectory that it's going, I'm gonna have to find somewhere else to base my airplane.
Thank you very much for your comments. And by the way, I'm happy to hear you come up and speak, because I think there is, in some quarters there may be people who think that people who fly airplanes are all fabulously wealthy. I think that is certainly not the case, but I appreciate the fact that you're kind of giving us your story, and you're proving that that someone, a regular person, can be involved in this pursuit, and we need to take that into account, that this is not something for, I don't know, I guess wealthy hobbyists or whatever you want to call it. So I appreciate you coming up and sharing some details of your story. Commissioner Johnson, I believe, has either a comment or a question.
Real quick, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 22.
Wow, kudos to you for building an airplane, and for coming up here and speaking your mind and your opinion. I appreciate that. And know that we all understand your concern. Nobody wants to be priced out of anything. And in today's economy, everyone's seeing that at every level, whether it's your senior citizens getting priced out because of taxes on your homes, or it's let's name, I guess the topic of the day is eggs now too. But everybody's getting pressed at everything, and that's one of the things we want to fix. So I want to provide some encouragement here and say we're hoping to try and fix that. That was one of the whole reasons why we brought on the fixed base operators. We want to try and fix this. We want to try and make this so this is a win-win for everybody. So you can have your airplane out there, and we don't send prices through the roof, so that we're not losing money as a county or for taxpayers, and that a fixed base operator can make a profit as well by running that airport for us. So that's really the goal we want to get to, and I really appreciate your comments tonight, and the heartfelt comments that you expressed. But we want to get to a point where you can keep your plane out there. We're not losing money. FBO is making a little profit himself, and everybody, it's a win-win-win across the board. We just have to figure out how to do that. I personally, and I don't mean to throw stones, but I'm going to throw one anyway. I think we could have managed this airport. When I say we, the county could have managed this airport better through the past several years. I think what was expressed by one of the original people on the board, it probably didn't turn out the way that it was really envisioned. Where we're at now probably wasn't how it was envisioned, and maybe we need to get back on track with that. But sounds like there's some opportunities out there. We just got to figure out how to make that happen, and figure out a way so that you can keep your airplane out there, and maybe in the future you'll have your own 737 out there. Thank you, though.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Any other citizens wishing to comment? Any closing thoughts before we, obviously if you want to come forward, do come forward, but I just want to see if any commissioners have anything that they would like to add to the discussion. Commissioner Wagner, before we wind it up, that is.
Yeah, thank you, and I kind of wanted to wait for everyone just to hear everything, and I appreciate everyone coming out. Mr. Schultz reminds me, actually my brother-in-law is a pilot. He learned out in Salina, Kansas, and has flown me from time to time, and my sons from downtown to our airport here and back. So I have some appreciation, I think, hopefully, for this issue. Dr. Gano, thank you for being here and the vision. I would tell you when I joined this commission and I went out there, I saw the same thing you did. But what I was told was we have land limitations that do not allow us to utilize that property in the way I think you envisioned it, in the way I at least initially saw it. And I'll use that as a jumping off point because we've talked in this in this room with this body about what is this airport? What is its market and who does it serve? And I think that's a pretty critical question. And it's part of the reasons why I appreciated the numbers that was brought to us this evening, because if the strategic plan of this facility is to essentially be for hobbyists, that is a much different plan and a much different execution than what it would be to create an industrial business opportunity and an economic developer driver in that way. And what we've heard so far, at least I've heard so far in my 2 years here, is that it seems to lean to the former, not necessarily to the latter. And if that is the case, the economics of that is wildly different. In which case, then I appreciate folks who say, why the increased fuel cost is troublesome and may force me out. Well, of course, because if I don't have a lot of folks traveling through because they're hobbyists, then that makes it very hard to have the economies of scale that allow you to keep fuel prices lower, right? So how do you then increase that? Well, I'm not exactly sure that we can build more hangars. I don't have a strategic plan that says so, and where would I put them? And to that point, then I would probably look to our administrator and staff to say, is there some point that we could actually do that investigation to figure out if that is even possible? But I won't let her answer that tonight. She can do it some other time. But that being said, the low-hanging fruit to me to bite into those 40 folks that are or out there asking for a hangar is to change those hangars and the usage of those that seem to be like some episode of Storage Wars. I don't think that's what we were planning for, and I hope the person who owns that is not necessarily in this room, but if you are, you know how I feel about Storage Wars now. So I, like everyone in this room, want to see something good happen there. but without any sort of strategic plan for it and no idea of really what our market is for it, then we are simply left with it could be more like another airport, but I don't know how to get there. Beats me. I don't know if our FBO does. He's probably got better ideas than I do, I'll guarantee that. But it does not make any sense to me if people who are complaining are the folks who are treating their hangar like storage or leaving their airplanes with flat tires, because then you're just buying a storage unit. And I'm not necessarily, I don't know if I care if I'm raising the price on a storage unit. I may care more if I'm raising the price for someone who is trying to use their airplane and use it as much as they want. So those are just my feelings. Again, Mr. Hupp, don't forget to leave me your email so I can take care of you. Thank you, sir. But to all of you, thank you for coming here. Thanks for your comments. I appreciate them very much. I have learned a lot from you being here this evening. And I, like Commissioner Johnson, I feel the same way. I want to find a solution. I want to find a solution that makes sense for this county. So thank you.
Commissioner Withington?
Have we ever done an economic report on this, like a possible future economic development around the airport?
Great segue, thank you very much. So to both your questions, I would share with the commission that out on the website, there is the airport master plan that was done in 2021. So it's not very old, and it does talk about what are those options, where could hangars go, how many hangars could be. And again, as we've talked about, you could do a lot with the airport depending on how much you want to do. If you want to relocate a highway, if you want to deal with, the stream bank, and some other challenges there. But the master plan does take a look at what was on the airport property now and what are some potentials.
Well, does that also include a financial cost?
With regard to building the hangars?
Like an estimate on how much because I remember when we talked about this originally, it was, we might have to relocate a highway, and the county doesn't have that money, and I don't think the state or federal government's gonna pay for that, so.
Right, no, I don't think they put any cost to that. It was just, those are big challenges with lots of zeros, and I don't think that the study went to that extent of estimating, but don't quote me on that. We'll take a look and see, and if we have it in the study, we'll reference it for the commission. If it does talk about in the study about expansion and additional hangars, the price of building a new hangar in 2021 is different than the cost to build hangars today. But certainly, we could look at that if that's a desire of the commission.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. Well, along those lines, and I freely admit that I enjoy asking questions that the administrator can answer, and I often walk right into them, and this is no different. So thank you. I do wonder, in that document, does it also include either a very simple market study or a complex, whatever, a market study that suggests what the upside of those sorts of investments will get? And the reason I ask is because we spent a lot of time tonight talking about if you're going to make a large capital asset investment, what kind of return do you see to make it worthwhile to make it in the first place? So just kind of curious if I'm going to walk into another opportunity to tell me that, yes, it's already there.
No, I can't tell you that because I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
We'll do some research and see if it's in that report. It's been a while since I read it.
Yeah, no, and that's fine, because I do want to at least recognize the points that have been made about there's lots of opportunities out there if we make these sorts of investments. And I do also recognize moving hard infrastructure has its cost, and you expect a return. So understanding what those returns are, I think, are important to know if we have that. So thank you very much.
Commissioner Withington, did you have anything else to add?
No, well, I guess I'll just say, the people that are using that as a storage, they're getting a hell of a deal. Have you ever seen the price of a storage unit? So they're getting a hell of a deal out there at the airport, thanks to the taxpayers.
Good observation. Oh, yes, sir, of course, please proceed. Make sure the light is on so we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. It's Gary Ewert, and just a comment on the storage situation. Every T hangar row has, by the nature of its design, a half a hangar on each end. And that hangar is too small to put anything other than a car or equipment in. There's no way to put an airplane in it. And the picture I saw, I mean, I can't swear to this, but it looked to me like it was that half a hangar that was being rented to store stuff in a kind of a disorganized manner, I will agree. But that area was not usable by an airplane. So that's my only comment.
Addendums, you're probably not interested
Go ahead
in.
and identify yourself for the audio, please.
Ed Duckworth again. Like I said, I've had hangars lots of places. I still have a hangar at Falcon Airport, Mesa, Arizona. And as far as storing things, you can't there. And how they get around it's real simple. They give you about a week notice. They'll tell you you're getting a hangar inspection. And you're only allowed one couch. You know, you can sit in your hangar. You're allowed one table and like 3 chairs. They got limits. You can't have stuff on the floor. It's just an airplane. Because they used to have a lot of stuff stored down there. And now they got everybody, it's just airplanes. And I agree, I think it should be, because there's a lot of junk being stored. So that's all. It's something to be real easy to implement.
Thank you. Yeah, I was in a hangar about 2 weeks ago, I guess, and the size of it accounted for a small plane. I believe there was a desk, a chair, and not much else. A couple of things that were, like a step ladder, get into the plane and work, that kind of stuff. But the one I was in the other a couple of weeks ago was pretty much a hangar for an airplane, and I don't think the desk looked very comfortable to sleep on, quite honestly. Any other comments from commissioners? I'll go ahead and round this off if you don't mind. Then one of the things that I had mentioned was we are in the airport business, for better or worse, at the moment. Anybody who's been in business knows that when you have customers, you've got to provide value for the dollar that they invest with you. And I think we need, there's an awful lot to be said for the numbers and the crunching of them and all that, but at the end of the day, while those are important things, what's important to the people who use our facilities is, are they getting a return on the fee that they pay? And that's the way businesses work. I don't think we should mistake government for a business, because we're not. But we should be using business, we do need to be using business principles to be able to invest correctly and to give the taxpayers return on their investment. This is not, when I say hobbyists, I meant that was something, I think that was a misnomer that people sometimes project on folks who fly these planes. But we have so much more going on out there at the airport, and I would like to hear from some of the folks at the airport board, because there are a number of things that go on out there that are way beyond just citizens who have airplanes and are storing them there and using that facility. We need to up our game, because the plain fact is this: we're not a business, but we are subject to some of the pressures that businesses are subject to, and that is, if we continue to provide less than a satisfactory return to the people who spend money with us, they will go elsewhere, and we will, while we are in the airport business, and I think we should stay there, if we do poorly, we will not be in the airport business, because there won't be anybody there with airplanes. So we need to make sure that what we're doing is providing that. And sometimes that's going to mean putting an investment out there. But we just don't have the option of walking away from this asset, and we're going to have to figure out a way to make it work for those citizens that we are trying to service. And we are going to have, in my opinion, we need to make sure that we take this investment and we take this asset that we have and make it really pay off. And I think at that point, then we do start to see the return on investment for our taxpayers that we have the responsibility to work towards. But it's going to take a lot of time, it's going to take a lot of effort, and it's going to take planning. So I appreciate everybody who is here and made those comments, because this is something that is such a a wonderful asset that we have. We cannot just let it die on the vine. We have to nurture it, and we have to bring it to full fruition, in my opinion. With that, we will go ahead and move out of the discussion items. Next, Administrator, our reports.
There is one report in your packet this evening, and that is the auditor's cash basis monthly report for January 2025.
Thank you. And Administrator, your comments?
Yes, just a couple. First is county offices will be closed Monday, the 17th, in observance of President's Day, and the Commission's next meeting is next Thursday, the 20th at 6 o'clock here in the chambers.
Commissioner comments? Commissioner Withington, we'd like to start with you this time, if you please. Excuse me. There you go.
So it was brought to my attention that we are not in compliant with Missouri State Statute 50.753 about counties the county commission is required to appoint a purchasing agent. Our purchasing agent hasn't been here since November, and apparently her name is still on the POs, and we have not, the county commission hasn't appointed a replacement, so I'd like to request that we get that resolved ASAP.
Thank you.
That's all I got.
Was that all you had?
That's all I had.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I thought you were...
I'm happy to, yes.
Administrator.
So that is correct. We are vacant of the purchasing manager. We are currently getting ready to recruit for that position, and so we have staff in the interim that's taking
But
care
I
of
think
that.
we need to get a temporary one designated ASAP, so we're in compliant with state statute.
That brings us to Commissioner Lawson. Do you have anything? Commissioner Wagner?
Yes, only since I want to finish off the theme. There was a big game on Sunday. Our team did not succeed, but I just want to say we had a heck of a season here in Kansas City, and look forward to next season. And Kelsey, go on your revenge tour next year.
Commissioner Johnson.
Just a quick shout out to my son Noah, turned 21 years old today, so happy birthday to Noah. Unfortunately, he's a firefighter paramedic, so he's working today and don't get to celebrate till maybe this weekend. But 21 years old, I think most dads would take their 21-year-old out for a beer or something, but I don't drink and he doesn't drink, so we're gonna have to figure something else out. But he's a good kid. I'm really proud of him. Happy birthday, Noah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Carpenter. I would just end it with saying that obviously we all are aware of the results of the game. Thank you for helping us relive that. But I think, you know, the measure of a fan is not how you react when they win uniformly. They had a heck of a year, heck of a season, I should say, and we would have loved to have seen a different outcome. But you know, we need to stand by our guys, thick or thin. The other thing that I would point out is that we have, it would seem that we are not yet finished with winter, and this past week has certainly shown that. I want to give due credit to certainly our county crews, those who are out there doing the very, very hard work, and I want to emphasize again that it is not without hazard. So I think we need to be grateful not only for their hard work, but for the danger that they are sometimes put into, and that would extend beyond our county crew. Those are the ones that we know the best and that we have the most affection for, but all of our municipal and other people out there who are working to make sure that we had safe streets to the best of their abilities. We're never, you know, sometimes people complain that, well, my street didn't get plowed or this or that. While there may or may not be legitimate criticisms, I think there can be no doubt that those men and women who are out there doing that work deserve our gratitude and a tip of the hat, because they are out there working the best they can with the tools and the ability they have. So certainly when you see a snow plow go by, and I try to do this, wave and smile and say thank you, because they are out there doing the hard work. And having said that, I do hope that somebody from my municipality who is involved in snow removal will come and look at my driveway, and perhaps, you know, I gave them a little pat on the back. Maybe there's something coming back. We'll see. Anyway, thank you very much. It was a long meeting, but now we are adjourned. Thank you.